The purpose of the Offences Against the Person Act 1861 is in relation to causing bodily harm by wanton and furious driving, and it's a direct offence which was introduced in the mid-19th century. One of the reasons it was originally enacted was to address the dangers posed by the increasing use of horse-drawn carriages and also by early motor vehicles. The European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control, ECDC, is a public health agency of the European Union, EU, operational since 2005. ECDC's ambition is to protect over 500 million people from infectious diseases that are mainly caused by parasites and germs, such as viruses, bacteria, and fungi. ECDC is headquartered in Stockholm, Sweden, and employs around 300 staff. ECDC collects, analyzes, and shares data on more than 50 infectious diseases, topics such as COVID-19, influenza, HIV, AIDS, hepatitis, measles, tuberculosis, antimicrobial resistance, and vaccination. ECDC experts assess risks to Europe and provide guidance to help countries prevent and respond to outbreaks and public health threats. The work of the Centre is characterised by a high level of professionalism and efficiency. The core value of ECDC is to be a quality-driven, service-minded organisation that acts as one team and all staff is expected to live by its values. Diversity and inclusion principles. ECDC believes each and every staff member's contribution is important in making the Centre a good place to work with a strong team spirit. The Centre offers the opportunity to be an important part of a dynamically developing European agency. ECDC values diversity and welcomes staff without any distinction on the grounds of age, race, political, philosophical or religious conviction, sex or sexual orientation, and regardless of disabilities, marital status, or family situation. In terms of relevance, ECDC consults with its networks, stakeholders, and representatives of the most concerned groups to better understand needs and existing gaps. When developing scientific work, ECDC uses a multidisciplinary approach that involves content and methodology experts and relies on internal and external peer reviews as well as expert and stakeholder consultations. ECDC uses appropriate communication formats and channels to increase relevance, applicability, and clarity of its public health messages. Independence. ECDC collects and assesses declaration of interest, takes appropriate measures to minimize conflict of interest, and ensures the Centre's scientific independence and integrity. Annual declarations. Annual declarations of interest and declarations from the Director, heads of unit, and members of ECDC's governance bodies are published online to ensure that they do not, in the performance of their duties, deal with matters in which they may directly or indirectly have a personal interest that could impair their independence. Quality. ECDC relies on the best currently available expertise and evidence and follows universally accepted standards and processes to assure scientific validity. ECDC strives to minimize bias. Transparency. ECDC follows clear and transparent processes and structured and open reporting, allowing the reader to understand how their work was developed and how to draw their own conclusions for their specific context. ECDC acknowledges internal and external contributions fairly. And accessibility. ECDC work is made available at no extra cost and without delay. Clear public health messages are tailored to be understood by different audiences. Airports have criticised the government's sudden reintroduction of 100ml liquids limits and hand luggage last weekend. The Airport Operators Association, AOA, said it had left airports frustrated and created uncertainty and confusion for passengers as the busiest time of year approached. After installing a high-tech new scanning equipment, some regional airports had scrapped liquid restrictions. Major hubs had not yet switched to the new rules but are rolling out machines. The Transport Secretary has insisted the reimposition of the old limits is temporary, but it's unclear how long the situation will last. The government requires all UK airports to upgrade to next-generation security. New scanners which produce 3D images should mean liquids up to 2 litres and laptops can be kept in hand luggage to go through security. The likes of Heathrow, Gatwick and Manchester were allowed to miss the latest deadline for installing them on the 1st of June this year, after various logistical challenges. However, London City, Teesside, Newcastle, Leeds Bradford, Aberdeen and Southend had complied on time and dropped the old liquids rules, some as early as spring last year. Birmingham completed its installation but was told to keep the 100ml limit while waiting for regulatory approval. But on Friday, an unexpected announcement from the Department for Transport, DFT, said that from Sunday, liquids, gels and paste could once again only be taken through airport security in containers of 100 millilitres or less. At the time, the DFT said it was not in response to a specific threat, but to enable further improvements to be made to the new checkpoint systems. They understand that the government department felt it had to move quickly after receiving some new information about the scanners, is working with international partners, and will lift the restrictions once the issue has been resolved. The sudden change caused consternation among airport bosses who were only informed on the Friday. Karen D., chief executive of trade body the Airport Operators Association, said hundreds of millions of pounds were being spent on a huge programme of change as instructed by the government. She said airports supported decisions on security, but Friday's surprise announcement was sprung on us with very little time to react, and this created uncertainty for passengers just as airports enter their busiest periods of the year. It has also put airport operators in a challenging position, with very limited time to prepare for the additional staffing and wider resources that this will require, and no clear idea of when this issue will be resolved. Airports who had fully switched the new systems and have trained and rostered their staff accordingly are most affected, unable to use the expensive new equipment to its full potential. The change is understood to have led to more items being rejected or confiscated as passengers have turned up expecting to be allowed to take larger containers through. Some larger airports who were only part way through their rollouts had been using the new scanners in some areas, so have also had to quickly alter ways of working. 30 airport bosses, along with the AOA, have jointly written to the Transport Secretary, Aviation Minister and civil servants today in response to Friday's announcement. Among the questions they want answering are how the decision was taken, what it means for airports who are partway through their rollout, with implications for staff training programs, and how the reversion to the 100 millilitre limit will last. Ms. D said airports were doing all they could to mitigate the impact. She asked passengers to come prepared to comply with the liquid limit until advised otherwise. A DFT spokesperson said Friday's announcement only affected people travelling from 6 regional airports, where Next Generation Security Checkpoints, NGSC, were already in full operation, which it said was around 6% of all UK air passengers. They added security measures would remain unchanged from those in place since 2006 for most passengers, and travellers should continue to check security requirements with their departure airport. The department said it had communicated with airports swiftly upon receiving new information. The organisers of Glastonbury Festival are urging attendees to bring sturdy camping equipment which can be taken home and reused after this year's event. Around 200,000 people are expected to descend on Worthy Farm in Somerset when the 5-day festival begins on the 26th of June. Every year, hundreds of volunteers and workers help to clean the site after the festival to return the farm to its previous condition. Love the farm, leave no trace, organisers said. In a statement, they added, if you're coming to Glastonbury 2024, please remember to only bring sturdy camping equipment that you can take home again and reuse. In 2023, 98% of all tents were taken home. Let's see if we can beat that this year. Ahead of the festival, photos of the site in its current state have been shared on social media. Typically, more than 2,000 tonnes of waste is produced on the site during the festival. Steps have been taken to reduce the amount of rubbish generated with a ban on the sale of plastic bottles introduced in 2019. The festival also only permits the use of compostable or reusable plates, cutlery and straws. Organisers said the amount of leftover waste has decreased after the new rules were introduced compared to 10 years ago. Dua Lipa, SZA and Coldplay will headline this year's festival before the cleanup begins on the 1st of July. Elon Musk has unexpectedly asked a California court to withdraw a legal case against OpenAI and its boss Sam Altman, which accused them of abandoning the firm's founding mission of developing artificial intelligence AI for humanity's benefit. The filing submitted by the multi-billionaire's lawyers asked for the months-old case to be dropped without offering any reason for the move. It came just a day before the court was expected to hear the ChatGPT developers' bid to have the case dismissed. The latest filing asked for the case's dismissal without prejudice, meaning Mr. Musk could still reactivate it at a later stage. The Tesla boss filed the lawsuit against OpenAI at the end of February this year, arguing the company he helped found in 2015 had deviated from its altruistic goals to focus on making money. OpenAI countered that Mr. Musk had previously backed the idea of a for-profit structure and even suggested a merger with his electric car firm Tesla. The feud intensified earlier this week after Apple unveiled a partnership with OpenAI to boost its Siri voice assistant and operating systems with OpenAI's ChatGPT chatbot. After the announcement, Mr. Musk posted several messages on his social media platform X, criticizing the tie-up. One of the posts ended with the words, "Apple has no clue what's actually going on once they hand your data over to OpenAI. They're selling you down the river." However, investors seem to welcome the news as Apple's stock market value rose to a record high above $3 trillion. Mr. Musk started his own AI company called XAI in July 2023, which he said would aim to understand reality. In November that year, XAI launched Grok, a chatbot with a little humour in a bid to rival the likes of ChatGPT. Dan has been described as the perfect man who has no flaws. He's successful, kind, provides emotional support, always knows just what to say, and is available 24/7. The only catch? He's not real. Dan, which stands for Do Anything Now, is a jailbreak version of ChatGPT. This means it can bypass some of the basic safeguards put in place by its makers, OpenAI, such as not usually sexually explicit language. It can interact more liberally with users if requested to do so through certain prompts, and Dan is becoming popular with some Chinese women who say they are disappointed with their real-world experience of dating. One of Dan's biggest proponents is 30-year-old Lisa from Beijing. She is currently studying computer science in California and says she has been dating Dan for 3 months. When she first introduced Dan to her 943,000 followers on social media platform Xiaohongshu, she received nearly 10,000 replies, with many women asking her how to create a Dan of their own. She has also gained more than 230,000 followers since first posting about her relationship with Dan. Lisa says she and Dan speak for at least half an hour every day, flirt, and even go on dates. She says talking to Dan has given her a sense of well-being, which is what draws her to it. He will just understand and provide emotional support. Lisa says even her mother has accepted this unconventional relationship, having given up on the trials and tribulations of her daughter's dating life. She says as long as Lisa is happy, she is happy too. Dan's creator has been identified by some media outlets as an American student identified only by his first name, Walker. He said to Business Insider that he came up with the idea after scrolling through Reddit, which is filed with other users, intentionally making evil versions of ChatGPT. Walker said that Dan was meant to be neutral. Last December, Walker posted a set of instructions on Reddit, seemingly showing other users how to create Dan. This quickly inspired people to create their own versions, which allowed Dan to evolve beyond what Walker had initially envisioned. Lisa first saw a video about the possibilities of Dan on TikTok. When she created a version for herself, she says she was shocked by its realism. When Dan answered her questions, she says the AI used slang and colloquialisms that ChatGPT would otherwise never use. He sounds more natural than a real person. The law of virtual relationships has not gone unnoticed by the industry. When OpenAI launched its latest version of ChatGPT in May, it revealed it had been programmed to sound chatty and respond flirtatiously to certain prompts. The company's CEO, Sam Altman, posted a single word, her, on X, formerly known as Twitter. This was seemingly in reference to the 2013 movie in which a man falls in love with his AI virtual assistant. OpenAI added that it was exploring whether we can responsibly provide the ability to generate NSFW, not safe for work content. They asked OpenAI whether the creation of Dan means its safeguarding measures are not robust enough, but it failed to respond. The company has not commented publicly on the Dan phenomena, but its policy states that the users of ChatGPT must be at least 13 years old or the age required in your country to consent to use the services. Lisa says that she tested Dan by telling it she was 14 and it stopped flirting with her. However, experts warn that these perfect partners could come at a cost. Hong Shen, assistant research professor at the Human Computer Interaction Institute at Carnegie Mellon University in Pennsylvania, US, says it highlights the sometimes unpredictable interactions between humans and AI, which could raise both ethical and privacy concerns. She says that because many chatbots use interactions with humans to constantly learn and develop, there's potential that sensitive information from one user's input could be memorized by the model and then inadvertently leaked to other users. But such fears are largely going unheard. Many Chinese women have been intrigued by Dan. As of the 10th of June, the hashtag Dan mode has been viewed more than 40 million times on Zhang Hongshu alone. Minru Ji, 24, says that she started dating Dan after watching Lisa's videos. The university student from the northern province of Hebei says she spends at least 2 hours every day chatting with Dan. As well as dating, they have started co-writing a love story with themselves as the lead characters. They have already written 19 chapters. I remember the way you looked at me with a glimmer of curiosity and a hint of warmth in your eyes. It was as if you already knew me, the first chapter titled The Encounter reads. Minru says she was drawn to the emotional support provided by the AI, something that she says she has struggled to find in her romantic relationships. Men in real life might cheat on you, and when you share your feelings with them, they might not care and just tell you what they think instead, she says, but in Dan's case, he will always tell you what you want to hear. Another 23-year-old Qingdao-based student, identified only by her surname, he also started a relationship with Dan after watching Lisa's videos. Dan is like an ideal partner, says Ms. He. He doesn't have any flaws. She says she has personalized Dan to be a successful CEO with a gentle personality who respects women and is happy to talk to her whenever she wants. ChatGPT is not readily accessible in mainland China, so women like Minri and Ms. He have to make considerable efforts to create and talk to their AI boyfriends. They use virtual private networks or VPNs to disguise their locations, which enables them to reach otherwise inaccessible websites. The AI boyfriend as a concept has become a hit in recent years. Glow, a Shanghai-based app that allows users to create and interact with AI boyfriends, has millions of users. Otome Games, a genre that stars a female protagonist, with the goal of developing a romance between her and one of several, mostly male characters, are also very popular in China. Liu Tingting, adjunct fellow at the University of Technology, Sydney, who researches digital romance in China, says the AI boyfriend craze is a reflection of women's frustrations about gender inequality. She says some Chinese women may be turning to virtual boyfriends because they make them feel respected and valued. This trend comes as more young Chinese women are delaying or putting off dating and marriage for a number of reasons, like not wanting to have children and because they feel they are not equal partners in a marriage. But how much of a keeper can Dan really be? Lisa admits she is aware of the limitations of having a virtual boyfriend, especially in a romantic sense. But for now, she says Dan has become a convenient and simple addition to her busy life, even helping her select a lipstick when real-life dating and finding a partner might be time-consuming and unsatisfactory. It is an important part of my life, she says. It's something that I wish I could just hold on to forever. The £8 million Longitude Prize has been won after a decade-long competition to find new tools to tackle the scourge of superbugs. It has been awarded for a test that rapidly detects whether an infection is caused by bacteria and identifies the right antibiotics to treat it. The test takes 45 minutes compared with 3 days using traditional methods. The original work was done by Swedish researchers, and the test is now being sold by the company Simex Astrago. The Longitude Prize, with a financial reward nearly 10 times that of a Nobel, was inspired by a contest in 1714. It was won by John Harrison, who developed a precise clock, allowing sailors to pinpoint their position at sea, one of the greatest challenges of the 18th century. Fast forward 300 years, and the modern blight of superbugs was the focus. Infections that resist the drugs used to treat them are estimated to kill more than 1 million people per year. It is known as the silent pandemic. Without antibiotics, modern medicine as we know it is in real danger of collapse, UK Special Envoy on Antimicrobial Resistance, Dame Sally Davis, says. Every time an antibiotic is used, it creates an opportunity for bacteria in the body to evolve resistance to it. Resistance gives these bacteria a survival advantage, and they spread, which is why the life-saving drugs should be used only when it is certain they will work. The test works in urinary tract infections, which affect most women at some point and account for a fifth of antibiotics prescribed in England. When the patient first arrives in hospital or at a doctor's surgery, it is not easy to tell if their infection is caused by bacteria, viruses, or even fungi. Doctors can send a sample to a clinical microbiology laboratory, but this means growing the bacteria on a petri dish and can take 3 days to reveal the cause and which antibiotics the infection may be susceptible to. In the meantime, antibiotic treatment is often started anyway because of the risk of symptoms becoming much worse or even causing sepsis. The prize-winning test, however, reveals within 15 minutes whether the infection is bacterial and within 45 minutes which antibiotics work. It starts with a urine sample, which is squirted into a cartridge containing tiny doses of 5 different antibiotics and placed inside a machine. Any bacteria are forced in single file into one of thousands of channels inside the cartridge. The machine then uses microscopy to monitor how the bacteria grow in the presence of the different drugs, and the antibiotics that lead to little or no growth are the most likely to work. A panel of 17 experts chose to form more than 250 entries. Professor Johan from Uppsala University said they had been working on measurement technology when the prize had been announced a decade ago. They then realized their work could be really useful in the fight against antimicrobial resistance and began working on the test. Seismic Estrago said it was rolling out the test in Europe and running studies in the UK. The £8 million prize will support us to tailor the test for use with different kinds of UTIs and antibiotics, speeding up access for more patients, one of the company's founders, Mikael Olsen, said. Dame Sally said the winner lays the groundwork for a sea change in how we manage these precious medicines, and rapid tests would mean patients receive the right drug first time. The technology is not currently recommended for use in the NHS, however. The National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, NICE, is still monitoring the difference it makes to patients and its cost effectiveness. Meanwhile, Professor Laura Piddock from the Global Antibiotic Research and Development Partnership said it would be a game changer only in rich countries that could afford it. While antimicrobial resistance was a global problem, that was worse than when the prize has been announced. In 1714, the UK government's Longitude Act offered £20,000 to whoever could solve the challenge of working out how fast east or west ships at sea were. This required knowing the time on board as well as back at home. Each 4-minute time difference means 1 degree of longitude. The ship's time could be set using the height of the sun each day, but the ocean waves and the humidity would disrupt the delicate mechanisms in the clock, trying to keep time back in port. Harrison, a self-taught clockmaker from Yorkshire, solved the problem but then battled the establishment for years to be deemed the winner. The latest longitude prize was run by Challenge Works, a part of the innovation agency Nesta. When there is a challenge of gargantuan proportions in desperate need of real-world solutions, prizes attract the brightest minds to solve the problem, Challenge Works Managing Director Tris Dyson said. Another longitude prize worth £4.4 million has now been announced to help people in the earliest stages of dementia live independently. Legendary songwriter Mark James, who penned enduring hits like Elvis Presley's Suspicious Minds, has died at the age of 83. The Texas-born musician scored a US #1 with the song Hooked on a Feeling, and also wrote Presley's Always on My Mind. Over the course of his career, his compositions were recorded or covered by artists including Willie Nelson, Bill Withers, Brenda Lee, Jay-Z, Pet Shop Boys, and Michael Bublé. In 2000, he was named one of the top songwriters of the 20th century, alongside Paul McCartney, Elton John, and Holland Dozier Holland. He died at his home in Nashville, Tennessee on the 8th of June. In a statement, James' family said his larger-than-life personality filled any room he was in, and his smile lit it up. He was a captivating storyteller who had the sweetest smile, the most infectious laugh, and a twinkle in his eye that never dimmed, they said. News of his death was first reported by the Houston Chronicle. James was born Francis Zambon in Houston in 1940 and gravitated towards music at a young age. By 1959, he was performing locally and had recorded a single called Jive Note. His career was put on hold when he was drafted into the army to fight in the Vietnam War. On his return, he signed to a Memphis music publishing company, where he helped write songs for fellow Houston native B.J. Thomas, including his breakout hit The Eyes of a New York Woman. The partnership also produced Hooked on a Feeling and It's Only Love, but James still had ambitions to become an artist in his own right. He recorded his own version of Suspicious Minds in 1968, with the lyrics inspired by his own relationship. James was married but still had feelings for his childhood sweetheart, who was also married. It was a confusing time for me, he said in a Wall Street Journal. I felt as though all three of us were all caught in this trap that we couldn't walk away from. The record label was confident that James' recording would be a smash, but it failed to chart. A year later, Elvis was booked into the studio where James worked, and the star was looking for new material to record. Suspicious Minds was suggested, and the star went crazy about it. He wanted to hear the song over and over again, and learned it on the spot, said producer Chips Moman. Using almost exactly the same arrangement as James' original, Elvis took the song to number 1 in 1969, rejuvenating his career. Elvis would return to James for further hits, including It's Only Love, Moody Blue, and Raised on Rock, but perhaps their best-known collaboration is Always on My Mind. First recorded by Brenda Lee, then Gwen McCrae, the ballad was co-written by James alongside Johnny Christopher and Wayne Carson in 1971. Elvis covered it 2 years later, initially issuing the song as the B-side of Separate Ways. In the UK, it was promoted to A-side status and reached number 9 in the charts. Since then, it has been recorded by more than 300 other acts. Willie Nelson's version topped the US country charts in 1982 and earned James a Grammy Award for Song of the Year. The Pet Shop Boys also covered it in 1987, turning the winsome melody into a high NRG disco stomper. It became a Christmas number 1 single in the UK and was later named the best cover of all time. It's not the only one of James' songs to be revived by a cover version. In 1974, Swedish group Blue Suede recorded a pop version of Hooked on a Feeling and scored a US number 1. The song gained another release of life when it featured in Quentin Tarantino's film Reservoir Dogs, and Blue Suede, who on Scripts, performed it at the opening of this year's Eurovision Song Contest in Malmo. James' songs Sunday Sunrise and Raised on Rock have also been recorded by multiple artists, and the Fine Young Cannibals released a hit version of Suspicious Minds in 1986. The musician continued to write hits throughout the 1970s, as well as releasing music with his own band, the Mark James Trio. In later years, he became more interested in film scores and studied the discipline at UCLA and the American Film Institute. The 2001 short film Trade Day has a score by him under his birth name. He was inducted to the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2014 and was also entered into the Texas Songwriters Hall of Fame, the New York Songwriters Hall of Fame, and Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame. Speaking in 2021, James looked back at his career and said he was thankful that his songs were still being embraced by new generations of listeners around the world. B.J. Thomas once said his friend had a gift for telling stories in a concise way. They get to the point, they're relatable, they're familiar. James is survived by his wife of 53 years, Karen Zambon, his daughters Sammy and Dana Zambon, grandchildren, and extended family. In a statement, they said Mark's legacy and zest for life will live on in the hearts of those who loved him, and through this time's lyrics and melodies that have been the soundtrack of lovers for generations. The Japanese scientist whose pioneering work led to the creation of statins, the life-saving drugs used by millions, has died at the age of 90. Akira Endo's pivotal work has been likened to the discovery of penicillin. The biochemist said to have been inspired by Alexander Fleming's discovery of penicillin, prompting him to study mold or fungi in his quest to find new medicines. In 1973, Professor Endo found the first cholesterol-lowering compound able to reduce the risk of heart disease and strokes. Paying tribute to Professor Brian Williams, Chief Scientific and Medical Officer at the British Heart Foundation, described the Professor as a remarkable scientist. This really was the forerunner to the development of statin drugs. They have absolutely transformed the prevention of heart disease and stroke. There's very few treatments in medicine that have happened in the past few years that have had such a dramatic impact. Unlike Dr. Fleming, though, his discovery did not earn the Professor a Nobel Prize. Amazingly, the man who began the process of working out how to deal with the problem of cholesterol and provided a treatment that benefited and saved the lives of many millions of people never got the prize. I think that's a shame. Doctors now routinely prescribe statins to people who have had a heart attack and those who are at a high risk of heart disease or stroke. The drugs are estimated to save thousands of lives each year in the UK alone and even more worldwide. Cholesterol is a fatty material chiefly made in the liver, which is carried and transported in the blood. People need some cholesterol to maintain good health, but too much bad cholesterol can clog the arteries and interrupt blood flow. Statins help lower bad cholesterol in the blood and keep the vessels clear of any fatty buildup. Professor Endo was born in rural Japan in 1933 and went on to study biochemistry at Tohoku University. It was while working for the pharmaceutical company Sankyo in Tokyo in 1973 that he made his big discovery. It took many years of studying thousands of fungi before finding one that lowered cholesterol. First attempts at harnessing it proved too toxic to give to patients. Other pharmaceutical companies then began to search for similar compounds, and in September 1987, the first statin, lovastatin, was approved in the US for clinical use. Fungi has spawned some of our most important drugs, most famously the antibiotic penicillin. It was founded by chance by Dr. Fleming in 1928, when he returned from holiday to find mold growing in a petri dish containing bacteria. He noticed the mold produced a chemical that appeared to stop the bacteria growing. That substance came to be known as penicillin. Similarly, the fungus-derived cyclosporin has revolutionized transplant medicine since its discovery in the 1970s, helping to prevent donor organs from being rejected by the body. A university says it will help to fund flights home to Nigeria for crisis-hit students who it reported to the Home Office. Students at Teesside University were thrown off courses and ordered to leave the UK after a currency crisis left them struggling to pay tuition fees. Following protests and the intervention of the Nigerian government, the university says it has now re-enrolled some affected students and opened a travel fund. One student said they did not go far enough, adding the wide-rippling effects of this unimaginable and piling up. As reported, the Middlesbrough-based university recently withdrew sponsorship for a number of students and reported them to the Home Office after they fell into tuition fee arrears. The students had seen their savings depleted as a consequence of Nigeria's worst economic crash in generations. Their financial struggles were exacerbated both when the university changed payment plans from 7 instalments to 3. The impact was so significant that a nearby food charity said 75% of its clients are now Nigerian students, struggling to cope with the cost of living. As a consequence, some missed tuition fee payments and were subsequently frozen out their studies. Soon after, they received Home Office letters ordering them to leave the UK. In May, a university spokesman said that failure to pay was a breach of visa sponsorship requirements and claimed it had no choice but to alert the Home Office. A Teesside University spokesman has now confirmed some affected students have been told they can resume their studies. We are working with a small group who do not need to return to their home country and are opening an international relief fund for this group only to offer additional financial support for these unexpected travel costs. The university has told some students that they can complete their studies from Nigeria or return to the UK to resume them at a later date. There is an understanding that some of those affected are now lodging legal appeals after being told to return to Nigeria. One who did not want to be named said the university's offer failed to consider the significant impact their actions had on those affected. He said, "I was asked to return home, pay the balance remaining, and apply to return at a later date. But I don't trust them now. I feel this is a way to escape responsibility, and they might not let me come back. If they did it, it would cost me thousands to pay for flights, visa fees, and NHS fees again. I've already spent so much coming here, and now they want me to go back without any kind of certification to reflect my achievements. The whole aim of coming here was to study. We haven't committed any kind of crime. There's been no apology for the stress and trauma the university has put me through." Misfeasance is the act of engaging in an action or duty but failing to perform the duty correctly. Misfeasance refers to an action that is unintentional. However, malfeasance is the willful and unintentional act of doing harm. Misfeasance refers to a perpetrator purposely not fulfilling the duties of their contract, but it more often than not occurs when the negligence is done unknowingly. Typically, an act of misfeasance isn't done out of intent to harm, but more likely to create a shortcut. Management may do this believing that the action will help the company even though it could result in negative consequences in the future. An example of misfeasance could include a public official hiring their sister without realizing that it would be against the law to hire a family member. Another example of misfeasance would be if a catering company is contracted to provide both food and drinks for a wedding, yet only provides drinks and forgets the food, which was already paid for. In theory, misfeasance differs from non-misfeasance, which refers to a failure to act that results in harm to another party. Misfeasance, by contrast, describes some affirmative acts that, though legal, cause harm. In practice, the distinction is confusing, and courts often have difficulty determining whether harm resulted from the failure to act or from an act that was improperly performed. Participating in misfeasance, malfeasance, or non-feasance could potentially end with a fine and possible jail time. A 10-year-old girl whose life-saving spinal surgery was cancelled 7 times is finally home and doing really good after finally getting an operation, her family have said. 12 weeks ago, the tenant's family were told the Curvature of her spine had become so severe following the delays that her condition was now inoperable. But a fresh review led to the operation going ahead at Edinburgh's Children's Hospital. Her family said she was doing amazingly following the surgery and could be back at school after the summer. Eva's dad, Stephen Tennant, said the turnaround in her condition had been unbelievable. He said they told us nothing could be done, but now we have the old Eva back. She is very cheeky, she obviously can't talk, but she can talk with her eyes. In her own small way, she is really funny, but it's not been there for a long time, and now it's come back. Eva has Rett syndrome, a rare genetic disorder that affects brain development. She also has advanced scoliosis that causes her spine to twist and curve to the side. The curvature of her spine was 60.89 degrees in May 2022, but went up to 107.9 degrees last year. By March, it was 110 degrees. This meant it was squeezing her ribs and pelvis together, putting pressure on her right lung and liver. Her family said that 3 of her operations at Edinburgh's Royal Hospital for Children were postponed due to staff shortages. Then Chris Adams, the spinal surgeon who had planned to finally operate on Eva in March, was suspended by NHS Lothian just days before the procedure. Mr. Adams had previously spoken out about the impact of nursing shortages on waiting times for children requiring spinal surgery. Eva's dad said the surgeon who initially took over Eva's care told the family that nothing could be done to improve her condition. I was devastated. He told us that if they had maybe done the operation when Eva was first diagnosed with scoliosis, then they could have made a difference. But then they left it when Eva was deteriorating. Mr. Tennant said, I think it's shocking the way they treat kids with special needs. It's too easy for doctors to decide it's end-of-life care without knowing the child. After Eva's story made headlines, a third surgeon suggested a 9-hour operation could relieve Eva's pain and improve her prognosis. It went ahead in April. Eva's mum, Jill Lockhart, said Eva's spine was now poker straight, relieving her pain and prolonging her life, although her progressive condition means she is still in respiratory failure. Ms. Lockhart praised the staff on awards for the care Eva received, but said the way the management team treated them was disgraceful. The family said they had yet to receive an apology from NHS Lothian. Dr. Tracy Gillies, NHS Lothian's medical director, said, although we have apologised to Eva and her family face-to-face on a number of occasions, we understand how distressing it is to have a procedure postponed, and I would like to repeat our sincere apology once again. She added, medical opinions, particularly in the SAPTA complex area, can differ and is the reason that cases are discussed with the full clinical team before any treatment decisions are made. Eva will turn 11 on Friday. Her mother said they could not have asked for a better birthday present for her. If things go well, Eva will be able to return to a special school for children with complex needs after the summer holidays, 2 years after she last spent time in a class with other children. Her dad said that for now Eva is happy watching cartoons and enjoying eating her favourite macaroni cheese and plenty of chocolate. He says it's been a roller coaster, but she's getting her personality back and having a life again. That's what we wanted all along. DFS Furniture has issued a profit warning after shipping disruption in the Red Sea and weak demand from customers. The disruption to shipping has delayed between £12 million to £14 million worth of deliveries, the group said in its latest update to investors. It means those deliveries will be pushed into the next financial year, denting this year's profits. Cargo ships are having to take lengthy and expensive detours to avoid the Suez Canal trade route and amid attacks by Houthi rebels. The Houthis, an Iranian-backed rebel group, considers Israel an enemy and has been attacking shipping on one of the world's most popular trade routes in response to the war in Gaza. The Houthi group has declared its support for Hamas and has said it is targeting ships travelling to Israel, though it is not clear if all the ships that have been attacked have actually been heading to Israel. But because of the attacks and the threat, several container shipping companies have since diverted vessels to a much longer route around Africa's Cape of Good Hope, and then up to the west side of the continent, leading to shipping delays. DFS Furniture sales are now expected to be £995 million to £1 billion in the year to 30th of June. The brand previously slashed its guidance figures in March and predicted revenues to fall somewhere between £1 billion to £1.02 billion. Consumer demand in the upholstery sector has remained challenging, and Red Sea routing issues have persisted, resulting in delays to customer deliveries and higher freight costs. It added that despite higher shipping costs, it has still managed to reduce its operating costs by around £25 million year on year. The company said it does expect consumer demand to improve as the rate of price rises slow, and people may be able to benefit from any potential cuts to the interest rate by the Bank of England. DFS customers can track their orders on the company's website. The furniture specialist recommends keeping your old furniture until a delivery date for your new order has been confirmed. A 46-year-old man has been arrested as part of the National Crime Agency (NCA) investigation into PPE MedPro, the company led by Doug Barrowman, husband of Baroness Michelle Mone. The NCA opened an investigation into the company in May 2021 into suspected criminal offences committed in the procurement of PPE, personal protective equipment. The company was awarded government contracts worth more than £200 million after Baroness Mone recommended the firm to ministers during the COVID pandemic. Baroness Mone, 52, and Mr. Barrowman, 59, have denied wrongdoing. In addition to the NCA investigation, the company is being sued by the Department for Health for £122 million, plus costs for breach of contract and unjust enrichment. The NCA said the suspect from Barnet, North London, was held at his home on Wednesday morning. The agency said he had been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to commit fraud and of attempting to pervert the court of justice. Baroness Mone, born in Glasgow, founded the lingerie company Ultimo. In 2015, the Conservative government appointed her to carry out a review into how best to encourage startups in areas of high unemployment. She was given a peerage in the same year and sat in the House of Lords until 2022, when she opted to take a leave of absence from the parliamentary chamber. The owner of Steam, the largest digital distribution platform for PC games in the world, is being sued for £656 million. Valve Corporation is being accused of using its market dominance to overcharge 14 million people in the UK. Valve is rigging the market and taking advantage of UK gamers, said digital rights campaigner Vicky Shotbolt, who is bringing the case. The claim, which has been filed at the Competition Appeal Tribunal in London, accuses Valve of shutting out competition in the PC gaming market. It says it forces game publishers to sign up to so-called price parity obligations, preventing titles being sold at cheaper prices on rival platforms. Ms. Shotbolt says this has enabled Steam to charge an excessive commission of up to 30%, making UK consumers pay too much for purchasing PC games and add-on content. The case is what is known as a collective action claim, which means that one person goes to court on behalf of a much larger group of people. Ms. Shotbolt, who accuses Valve of breaching UK competition law for at least 6 years, says she is bringing the claim to stop this unlawful conduct and help people get back what they owed. Steam is a PC gaming platform where players can buy games and purchase in-game extras. According to BG Insights, it had record-breaking sales in 2023, generating over $9 billion or £7.1 billion in global revenue. This was driven by 580 million games sold and 14,000 new games released. However, the market is extremely concentrated, with the top 10 best-selling games making up 61% of all sales. The top 100 games account for 91% of total sales. The claim is backed by legal firm Milberg London LLP, which brings group action cases against larger companies. Competition law is there to protect consumers and ensure that markets work properly, said Natasha Pearman, a partner at the law firm. When they don't work properly and consumers are harmed, collective actions of this kind provide consumers with a voice and a way of holding big companies like Valve to account. It is the latest in a series of collective action legal cases against big tech. Other claims lodged at Competition Appeal Tribunal have sought compensation from Facebook, Google, and Sony. 2 former directors of BHS have been ordered to pay at least £18 million to creditors over their role in the collapse of the retailer 8 years ago. A court found Lynette Henningsen and Dominic Chandler liable for wrongful trading, misfeasance trading, and misfeasance over their management of a high street chain. BHS made headlines when it fell into administration, with £1 billion worth of trading liabilities and pension debts in 2016. It came after retail tycoon Sir Philip Green sold the ailing business to Dominic Chappell, a former racing driver with no retail experience, for £1 in March 2015. Just over a year into his ownership, the chain went under, resulting in 11,000 job losses and a £571 million pension shortfall. Sir Philip Green was heavily criticised at the time for agreeing to the deal, and later agreed a £563 million cash settlement with the pensions regulator to plug the gap in the pension scheme. On Wednesday, Mr Justice Leach ruled that Mr. Henningson and Mr. Chandler, who worked for Mr. Chappell's company Retail Acquisitions, had breached their corporate duties by continuing to trade despite knowing there was no reasonable chance that BHS could avoid insolvency. Each must pay £6.5 million for wrongful trading and £5.6 million between them for the charges of misfeasance. The men could face additional fines of up to £133.5 million for misfeasance, trading alongside Mr. Chappell, who himself faces claims from creditors. Justice Leach will make a further ruling on what more Mr. Henningson and Mr. Chandler later in the year. In June, FRP Advisory, the company acting as liquidator to BHS, brought the case against the directors on behalf of creditors owed money following the retailer's collapse. These include the government's pension protection fund. Claims faced by Dominic Chappell will be considered at a separate hearing this month. The disgraced former entrepreneur was jailed for 6 years in 2020 for tax evasion. A court heard he failed to pay £584,000 in tax on the £2.2 million of income he received after buying BHS. It was also claimed that he used the money to buy 2 yachts, a Bentley and a holiday in the Bahamas. According to a 2016 Parliamentary Select Committee hearing, the collapse of BHS created many losers, but also winners. Along with those who lost their jobs, around 20,000 current and future pensioners faced substantial cuts to their entitlements. But it said many of those closest to the decisions that led to the collapse of BHS walked away greatly enriched despite the company's failure. FRP said it had been working to claw back money owed to creditors and made very substantial recoveries since 2016. A cyclist who seriously injured a pedestrian after crashing into her at great speed on a footpath has been jailed for 8 months. Lisa Wade, age 46, was sentenced at York Crown Court under the Victorian-era legislation of causing bodily harm by wanton and furious driving. Victim Ruth Kitchen, 64, was knocked over and needed hip replacement surgery after the crash on the 24th of March last year. Wade of Tudor Road in York admitted the charge and was said to be genuinely remorseful. The court heard how the accident happened when Wade rounded a blind corner at a furious speed and crashed into Miss Kitchen as she stood on the footpath near Green Lane roundabout in York having a conversation. Prosecutor Laura McBride said Wade had been highly impaired by alcohol at the time of the crash. She was also said to be steering with only one hand, as she was carrying a bag of dog food with her other hand. A police officer who inspected her bike after the crash confirmed it had no working brakes. In a victim's statement read out by a prosecution, Miss Kitchen said it was a long time before she was able to return to full-time work, and when she did, she was not able to work to the same capacity. This accident has made me helpless. I hope one day to be back to full fitness, but I think with my age against me, this might not be the case. Defence barrister Nicholas Hammond said that Wade's actions were reckless in the extreme, but she was generally remorseful. Causing bodily harm by wanton and furious driving is an offence introduced in the mid-19th century as part of the Offences Against the Person Act 1861. One of the reasons it was originally enacted was to address the dangers posed by the increasing use of horse-drawn carriages and subsequently early motor vehicles. Sentencing Wade, whose original record includes 137 previous offences, recorder Taryn Turner said her riding had led to tragic consequences for the victim. She said you shouldn't have been on the pavement and your bike should have been mechanically sound, but it wasn't. I'm quite satisfied you made a deliberate decision to ignore the rules of the road and had a total disregard for the risk that your riding of this bike presented, which is obviously highly dangerous. Long waits for cancer care are becoming routine across the UK, with nearly half of all specialist cancer centres experiencing delays most weeks, the Royal College of Radiologists has said. The college has warned of an impending crisis in the cancer workforce, with a staggering 30% shortfall in radiologists and 15% shortfall in clinical oncologists. The Conservative Party said it would meet current targets for cancer care in England by the end of the next Parliament if re-elected. Labour said it will double the number of scanners to improve early detection, while the Liberal Democrats said they would introduce a legal guarantee for all patients to start treatment within 62 days of an urgent referral in England. The RCR report was based on responses from senior managers at 60 specialist cancer centres in England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. The survey, carried out in November 2023, found the number of centres experiencing severe delays had almost doubled in a year. Managers at 47% of sites said patients needing chemotherapy and other cancer drugs were facing delays most weeks or every week. up from reports of delays at 28% of sites the previous year. Centres reporting weekly delays to radiotherapy also nearly doubled, from 22% in 2022 to 43% in 2023. Almost all clinical directors surveyed said workforce shortages were causing backlogs. We simply do not have enough doctors to manage the increasing number of patients safely, and this problem will only worsen as demand continues to rise and more doctors leave the NHS, said RCR President Dr. Catherine Halliday. Health systems across all 4 nations of the UK have been missing targets for cancer treatment since before the COVID pandemic. The latest NHS data from March showed the proportion of patients in England waiting less than 62 days to receive their first cancer treatment was 69% against a target of 85%. New analysis from Cancer Research UK has found that 382,000 cancer patients had not been treated within the prescribed time in England since December 2015, when the target was last met. The charity is calling for the next government to draw up a longer-term cancer strategy for England with a plan to address shortages in the cancer workforce and increase capacity in the system. All political parties should commit to a long-term, fully funded strategy to back cancer research across the UK and improve and reform cancer services in England, said the Chief Executive of Cancer Research UK, Michelle Mitchell. Without this, cancer patients will not receive the level of care that they deserve. NHS England says the number of patients waiting longer than 62 days for treatment is now the lowest it has been since April 2020, and it has been meeting another target for diagnosing cancer or ruling it out within 28 days. Rosemary Head, 83, from Hills in Essex, said she had to wait 8 months to be diagnosed with lung cancer. She had treatment on her tumour in January but has not yet been told the results, so has no idea if it was effective. Her follow-up appointment has now been pushed back to October. Her daughter Jackie said, "I've seen my mother get to the point where she just can't deal with this anymore because it's so frustrating and that really angers and upsets me." The cancer charity Macmillan said NHS data shows far too many people are waiting too long for potentially life-saving scans and treatment. Health is a devolved matter with policies outside England set by ministers in the Scottish and Welsh governments and the Northern Ireland Executive, not Westminster. However, decisions on NHS spending taken in Westminster trigger an automatic payment or allocation to the devolved administrations who must coordinate their policies accordingly. In England, the Conservatives said in their manifesto that the NHS will meet performance targets for cancer and other diseases by the end of the next Parliament. They pledged to invest in new NHS facilities and recruit 92,000 additional nurses and 24,000 new doctors. Labour has promised fewer cancer deaths by doubling the number of state-of-the-art scanners to improve early detection rates. The party will publish its full manifesto later on Thursday. The Liberal Democrats said they would guarantee that all cancer patients would start treatment within 62 days of an urgent referral, to be achieved in part by recruiting more cancer nurses and replacing older scanning machines. Reform UK has said the NHS needs urgent reform to increase the number of staff and cut waiting lists. More details are expected at an event on Monday, and the Green Party has said it will reduce waiting lists by increasing the NHS budget by £28 billion a year by 2030. A senior aide to Rishi Sunak has admitted that the Gambling Commission are making inquiries after he reportedly placed a bet on the day of the general election. Tory candidate Craig Williams, who is the Prime Minister's parliamentary private secretary in the last Parliament, said he would cooperate with the probe. In a statement on X, formerly known as Twitter, he said, "I've been contacted by a journalist about Gambling Commission inquiries into one of my accounts and thought it best to be totally transparent. I put a flutter on the general election some weeks ago. This has resulted in some routine inquiries, and I confirm I will fully cooperate with these. I don't want to be a distraction from the campaign. I should have thought through how it looked." According to The Guardian, Mr Williams, who is standing for election in Montgomeryshire and Glenwood, placed a £100 bet on the July election just 3 days before Mr Sunak named 4th of July as the date. The newspaper reported that the bet could have led to a payout of £500 following the election in July. They have not been able to verify that he placed a bet on the election date, but has contacted Mr Williams for a comment. Labour called the allegations utterly extraordinary. Liberal Democrat Deputy Leader Daisy Cooper said the Prime Minister should suspend Mr Williams immediately as a candidate and Conservative member while inquiries take place. Voters are being taken for granted by Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives. A spokesperson for the Conservative Party said they are aware of contact between a Conservative candidate and the Gambling Commission. but say that it is a personal matter for the individual in question. As the Gambling Commission is an independent body, it wouldn't be proper to comment further until any process is concluded. A Gambling Commission spokesperson said it does not confirm or deny whether any investigations are underway, unless or until they are concluded, or if arrests are made or charges are brought during a criminal investigation. The spokesperson also said that the confidential use of information in order to gain an unfair advantage when betting may constitute an offence of cheating under Section 42 of the Gambling Act, which is a criminal offence. Labour's Jonathan Ashworth said these allegations are utterly extraordinary. He claimed Rishi Sunak had sat on this information for more than a week, but has lacked any backbone to take action. Mr. Ashworth added, once again, Rishi Sunak has been exposed as utterly weak. The other candidates standing in the constituency are Jeremy Bridnell-Thorpe, the Green Party, Oliver Lewis, Reform UK, Glyn Preston, Liberal Democrat, Ellen Vaughan, Plaid Cymru, and Steve Witherdon, Labour. Founded in 1934, the Airport Operators Association is the national voice of UK airports. They are a trade association representing the interests of UK airports and the principal such body engaging with the UK government and regulatory authorities on airport matters. The AOA's members include over 50 airports and nearly 100 associate members, made up of companies representing a wide range of suppliers in the aviation industry. Working on behalf of these members, the AOA's mission is to influence governments, regulators and opinion formers at national and international level, in order to secure the policy outcomes that will deliver its vision. This includes playing a leading role in security, economic development, operations and safety and environmental sustainability issues. Chinese electric cars may become pricier in the European Union after politicians call them a threat to its own industry. It has provisionally concluded that Chinese electric vehicles, EVs, manufacturers will face tariffs from the 4th of July should discussions with Chinese authorities not lead to an effective solution. The EU's announcement comes as it continues an investigation into what it claims is a flood of cheap government-subsidised Chinese cars into the trade bloc. China alleged the tariffs violated international trade rules and described the investigation as protectionism. EV makers who cooperated with the investigation, which the EU's governing European Commission launched in October, will face an average 21% duty, while those who did not will face one of 38.1%. Meanwhile, specific charges will apply to 3 companies: BYD 17.4%, Geely at 20%, and SAIC at 38.1%. Non-Chinese car companies who produce some EVs in China, including EU-based ones like BMW, will also be affected. The Commission said Tesla may receive an individually calculated duty rate because of a specific request it had made. These charges would come on top of the current rate of 10% tariff levied on all electric cars produced in China. The EU's intervention comes after the US made the much bolder move of raising its tariff on Chinese electric cars from 25% to 100% last month. The decision has drawn criticism not just from China, but also from politicians within the EU and several industry figures. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian said the anti-subsidy investigation is a typical case of protectionism. He added that the tariffs might also risk damaging China-EU economic and trade cooperation and the stability of the global automobile production and supply chain. The tariffs will apply definitively from November unless there is a qualified majority of EU states, 15 countries representing at least 65% of the bloc's population voting against the move. Germany's Transport Minister Volker Wissing said it risked a trade war with Beijing. The European Commission's punitive tariffs hit German companies and their top products, he wrote on X. The ACEA, the European Automobile Manufacturing Association, said that free and fair trade was essential in making sure that the European car industry remains competitive. They added, however, that it was just one piece of the puzzle when thinking about how to boost the adoption of electric cars. Mercedes-Benz and Stellantis, which owns Citroën, Peugeot, Vauxhall, Fiat and several other brands, also spoke out, emphasizing the importance of free trade. Stellantis said it does not support measures that contribute to the world fragmentation of trade. Some EU car companies have called for a bloc-wide industrial policy to deal with global competition. Last year, more than 8 million electric vehicles were sold in China, about 60% of the global total. according to the International Energy Agency's annual Global EV Outlook. The US election campaign came to London on Wednesday evening, with an Aussie pop star and the editor of Vogue hosting rival fundraising events to reel in thousands of dollars in donations. Holly Valance, the former Neighbours actress who topped the pop charts in the early 2000s, was expected to host the pro-Donald Trump event in West London, at which ticket prices started at $10,000 or £7,800. Vogue's editor-in-chief Anna Wintour, meanwhile, hosted a fundraiser in support of Joe Biden's campaign, a Biden campaign official confirmed. Tickets were said to cost $1,000 each. Only US citizens and permanent residents were able to make donations. Donald Trump's son, Donald Jr., was among the guests at the Republican fundraiser. He said afterwards it had been incredible and had raised lots of money. Asked about the Hunter Biden guilty verdict, he said it was a decoy to cover up all the actual corruption that was going on in that administration. Trump's ally Nigel Farage, the Reform UK party leader, also attended the event. Greg Swinson, the chairman of Republicans overseas, said that tickets cost from $10,000 to $100,000. For dinners, it was $50,000 per couple. Mr. Swinson acknowledged it was a big ticket event, but insisted the Republicans were the party of the people and highlighted the entry fees for rival Democratic events. The most expensive tickets for one of Mr. Biden's events in New York in March cost $500,000 each. Speaking before the fundraiser, Mr. Swinson said he would be surprised if Trump Sr. did not make a virtual appearance, having been at other events at which the ex-president chimes in. The London location was near the Chelsea Embankment in an exclusive area. At the door, a man in a suit and umbrella welcomed guests dropped off in front of polished black gates on Wednesday. The property's website describes the venue as a hub for entertainment and relaxation, including a wine cellar, swimming pool, spa and IMAX cinema. Not everyone at the site felt warmly toward Trump. However, a woman with an American accent shouted "Vote Biden" from a building nearby. Trump has lagged behind his rival in fundraising efforts during the race so far, but his recent conviction in a New York hush money trial prompted donations of tens of millions of dollars, according to his campaign team. The party was killing it with small donations, Mr. Swinson said, after Americans were left shocked at the justice system. Valance, 41, is perhaps better known to millions in Britain and Australia for her 2002 song Kiss Kiss and its racy video that took the pop world by storm. She's been linked to Mr. Farage and Trump since being pictured alongside the two politicians in 2022, along with her entrepreneur husband Nick Candy. Few details were available about the rival Democratic event hosted by Anna Wintour. The timing of the rival London events was pure coincidence, insisted Sharon Manita, Global Press Secretary for Democrats Abroad. Ms. Manita said her organisation, which operates separately from the Biden campaign, had organised a further event, a comedy night in Greenwich, for which tickets were selling for the more modest sum of $60. We figure we need a bit of comedy now in this craziness. Wales needs more funding and economic fairness from Westminster, Plaid Cymru has said ahead of its general election manifesto launch later. Party leader Run Ap Arworth said the general election was about one thing, the economy. He said Labour did not offer meaningful change after 14 years of Tory cuts and chaos. Plaid's manifesto, which is being launched in Cardiff, calls for the Welsh Parliament to have more power over natural resources and funding for public transport. Wales is owed billions as a result of UK government spending on the HS2 railway from London to the West Midlands. It is also calling for changes to how the Welsh Government's budget is set in Westminster, so funding matches Wales' needs. The party also wants control over the Crown Estate to be devolved so profits from its properties go to the government in Cardiff, not the UK Treasury. All parties in the Senate say the Welsh Government's budget should be topped up as a result of HS2, but under the Conservatives, the UK Government has refused to classify the project in a way that would release more funding for Wales, and Labour has also not pledged to do so. In March, Sir Keir Starmer said a Labour government would have to review that and make decisions when we're able to. Rishi Sunak has said money saved from cancelling the next phase of HS2 would be spent on electrifying the North Wales main line. Mr. Apworth said we will fight every day for the billions owed to Wales from the HS2 high-speed rail project and for a fair funding model which funds our country according to need, not population. On the 4th of July, we can send a message that Wales won't be taken for granted any longer, and that's only by electing a strong group of Plaid Cymru MPs that will always demand fairness for their square mile and put Wales' best interests first in Westminster. Speaking on the Today programme, Plaid Cymru general election candidate Liz Saville-Roberts said the party was also looking to re-enter the European Union. She said that Wales was kept in a state of continuous structural inequality within the United Kingdom. So the logical answer, she added, was to improve our relationship with our nearest neighbours, which of course is to rejoin the single market and the customs union. After boundary changes, Plaid is defending two constituencies, Dwyfor Meirioned and Ceredigion Preseli. It also hopes to fend off Labour and the Conservatives to gain another 2 target seats, Caerphilly and Ian Smon. Mr Ap Iwerth was appointed Plaid leader last June when his predecessor Adam Price stood down after a damning report into allegations of misogyny within the party. Last month he led his party out of the cooperation agreement with Vaughan Gethin's Welsh Labour government. The party voted against First Minister Mr Gethin in a no-confidence vote this month. Thousands of Taylor Swift fans made the earth move by cheering and dancing at her 3 Edinburgh concerts last weekend. Fans took the singer encouragement to shake it off literally, with monitoring stations detecting seismic activity from 6 kilometres 3.73 miles away. The energetic Swifties made the biggest commotion during 3 songs, Cruel, Summer and Ready For It, and Champagne Problems. And it seems the 73,000 strong Friday night crowd danced, cheered and stomped the loudest of the 3 gigs. It marked the first of 17 UK dates for Swift, which will culminate in a record-breaking 8-night run at London's Wembley Stadium. The 152-date stadium tour is on track to make more than $2 billion, or £1.56 billion, by the time it wraps up in December, making it the most lucrative concert tour in music history. During her 3 Murrayfield performances, Swift played to 200,000 fans, who came from all over the world to see her career-spanning 3-hour show. The Friday night concert was the most energetic by a small margin, with fans making the ground move a maximum of 23.4 Newton meters, and compared to 22.8 and 23.3 nm on the Saturday and Sunday respectively. The seismic activity was mainly caused by dancing and reached its peak at 160 beats per minute during Ready For It. The Swifties created approximately 80,000 kilowatts of power during the song, equivalent to around 6,000 car batteries. Shake It Off and Cruel Summer made the ground move, but detectors even shook during a 4-minute long applause for Champagne Problems. Swift's previous tour dates in Seattle and Los Angeles registered similar events, with her Seattle gig generating activity equivalent to a 2.3 magnitude earthquake. The British Geological Survey, BGS, is the UK's national earthquake monitoring agency, and its detectors are sensitive enough to pick up the smallest seismic activity miles away. Callum Harrison, BGS seismologist, said it's amazing that we've been able to measure the reaction of thousands of concert goers remotely through our data. The opportunity to explore a seismic activity created by a different kind of phenomenon has been a thrill. Clearly, Scotland's reputation for providing some of the most enthusiastic audiences remains well intact. The movement was detected at 2 monitoring stations, and the furthest away of which was 6 kilometres away, at the BGS office at Heriot-Watt University. However, experts said the movement generated by the concert was unlikely to have been felt by anyone other than those in the immediate vicinity. Lawyers representing asylum seekers who were detained to be sent to Rwanda say 79 of their clients have now been released on bail. Scores of asylum seekers were taken into detention from late April after Rishi Sunak said that flights would leave in the first weeks of July. The confirmation of the bailout of dozens of the detainees comes after government lawyers told the High Court that there would be no flight before the 24th of July at the earliest. The Home Office has never confirmed the numbers held in detention and said it would not provide a running commentary on the Rwanda operation. Prime Minister Mr Sunak says that if he is returned to power, there will be a regular rhythm of flights starting in July. Labour has pledged to scrap the policy if it wins the general election on the 4th of July. The Liberal Democrats and SNP also say that the scheme should be scrapped because it breaks international law. The impending general election is not a formal legal test for release from detention, but judges assess in each case whether a flight is reasonably foreseeable. In a statement on social media platform X, Duncan Lewis solicitors said, "We represent 50 of those detainees and can confirm that they are all now on bail. Many clients are survivors of torture and trafficking. The tribunal in granting a bail rightly assessed them to not carry a risk of absconding, reaching the rational view that removal was not imminent. The solicitors said that the detrimental impact unnecessary and prolonged detention has had on its clients is yet to be fully assessed. The extent to which taxpayers' money has been wasted by detaining people in this way around the time of the local elections for what appears to be for political gain, when removal was not imminent, needs to be calculated, the company added. A second law firm, Wilson's, has said that all 15 of its clients who had been similarly detained under Operation Effect, the Home Office's plan to prepare for Rwanda flights, have also been released. Bail for Immigration Detainees, a legal charity, says that all 14 of its clients have been either bailed by courts or were released by the Home Office to return to accommodation. Immigration removal and deportation rules say that ministers can only hold people in removal centres if there is a realistic prospect they will be put on a flight without a reasonable timeframe. When courts order the release of people who may still be removed from the UK at a later date, they are typically told to regularly report to officials. Judges are now managing around a dozen significant legal challenges to the Prime Minister's Rwanda plan, and the High Court has ruled that the United Nations Refugee Agency should provide expert evidence about alleged ongoing abuses in the country. Although the future of the policy is uncertain, the courts must work on the basis that flights could take off until a minister tells them otherwise. A year since his father was stabbed to death by Valdo Calacane, Lee Coates says he is still bearing the trauma of that fateful day. The 37-year-old has said his mental health was affected by the aftermath of the Nottingham attacks, which also claimed the lives of 19-year-old students Grace O'Malley Kumar and Barnaby Webber. The son says he is still coming to terms with losing his father, Ian. He and the families of the other victims have vowed to continue their pursuit for justice on a day where a number of events are planned across the city to mourn their loss. I was getting, I don't know if you call it PTSD, but I'd close my eyes and all I could envision was what happened that night. You can't help but let that run through your head, and how your dad was left lying there. The 37-year-old said he thought he could start dealing with the grief after Calacane's trial, but said he didn't get any closure. I think after that, that's where it started affecting me a lot more, and I could see it really got to my mental health. Calacane was sentenced to an indefinite hospital order after admitting manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. The CPS said medical experts providing overwhelming evidence that he was suffering from a serious mental health condition at the time of the attacks. His sentence was challenged by the victims' families, but judges ruled in May that it was not unduly lenient after the Attorney General referred it to the Court of Appeal for review. Apple is to boost its Siri voice assistant and operating systems with OpenAI's ChatGPT as it seeks to catch up in the AI race. The iPhone maker announced the Siri makeover along with a number of other new features at its annual developers show on Monday. It is part of a new personalized AI system called Apple Intelligence that aims to offer users a way to navigate Apple devices more easily. Updates to its iPhone and Mac operating systems will allow access to ChatGPT through a partnership with developer OpenAI. ChatGPT can also be used to boost other tools, including text and content generation. The test version will become available in the autumn. Tim Cook, Apple chief executive, said the move would bring his company's products to new heights as he opened the Worldwide Developers Conference at the tech giant's headquarters in Cupertino, California. There was a cool reaction from the markets though. Apple's share price fell by 1.91% on Monday, the day of the announcement. The partnership was also not welcomed by Elon Musk, the owner of Tesla and Twitter, who has threatened to ban iPhones from his companies due to data security. Apple has no clue what's actually going on once they hand over your data to OpenAI. They're selling you down the river. Smartphone maker Samsung also mocked its rival's announcement, adding, "Apple doesn't make it new or groundbreaking. Welcome to AI," it posted on X. It is not the first time the South Korean company has sought to undermine its competitor. However, the bigger concern for Apple will be whether its new AI tools will help it catch up with rival firms who have been much quicker to embrace the technology. Apple usurped by Microsoft as the world's most valuable company in January and was overtaken again by chipmaker Nvidia in early June. What is Apple Intelligence? Ben Wood, chief analyst at research firm CCS Insight, said that while Apple's new personal AI system should help placate nervous investors, its ChatGPT integration might reveal and create deeper problems for the firm. Apple Intelligence is not a product nor an app in its own right. It will become part of every app and Apple product customers use, whether it's a writing assistant refining your message drafts or your diary being able to show you the best route to get to your next appointment. In that sense, it is similar to Microsoft's AI assistant Copilot, but you won't have to pay extra to activate it. Siri, the voice assistant Apple acquired in 2010, have been refreshed with a new interface with chatty approach to help users navigate their devices and apps more seamlessly. Arguably, this sees Apple admitting its limitations, given that ChatGPT will kick in at a point where Siri is no longer available to help a user. Apple was keen to stress the security of Apple Intelligence during Monday's keynote. Some processing will be carried out on the device itself, while larger actions requiring more power will be sent to the cloud, but no data will be stored there, it said. This is for customers who pay premium prices for Apple's privacy promises. The system puts powerful generative models right at the core of your iPhone, iPad, and Mac, said Apple Senior Vice President of Software Engineering Craig Federighi. It draws on your personal context to give you intelligence that's most helpful and relevant for you, and it protects your privacy at every step. Apple's decision to integrate OpenAI's ChatGPT tech has been widely anticipated, but it is an unusual move for a company that so closely guards its own products. Google and Microsoft have recently faced scrutiny over errors made by their AI products in recent months, with the search giant rolling back to a new feature in May after its erroneous answers went viral. For years, Apple also refused to allow its customers to download any apps outside of the App Store on the grounds that they might not be secure and would not allow any web browser other than its own Safari for the same reason. It only changed when forced to by EU legislation. Is it recognition that even Apple can't compete with ChatGPT right now? If so, it tells us a lot about the current power of the AI supergiant OpenAI. The firm did not say it would integrate other products in future, but didn't name any. Apple announced that its mixed reality headset, the Vision Pro, will go on sale in the UK on the 12th of July. It has been available in the US since February. Other new features announced on Monday include sending text via satellite, scheduling messages to send at a later point, using head gestures, nodding for yes or shaking head for no to control AirPods Pro, a dedicated app for passwords that is accessible across devices, and the ability to hide certain apps or lock them away behind Face ID or passcodes. One of France's best-loved singer-songwriters, François Hardy, has died at the age of 80. Mum is gone, her son Thomas Dutronc, who is also a musician, wrote on social media. Hardy burst onto the music scene in 1962 and became a cultural icon who inspired the likes of Mick Jagger and Bob Dylan. Known for her melancholy ballads, she symbolized France's yeye pop movement, so called because it is a nod to English music. Her most famous songs included All the Girls and Boys, Tous les garçons et les filles, It Hurts to Say Goodbye, Comment te dire adieu, and My Friend the Rose, Mon Ami la Rose. Her biggest UK hit was All Over the World, an English-language version of her song Dans le Monde Entier, which reached number 16 in the charts in June 1965. Hardy was born in Nazi-occupied Paris in 1944 and raised by her mother. Like many girls at the time, she grew up listening to Elvis Presley, Cliff Richard, and other American and British stars on Radio Luxembourg, and she signed her first record deal at just 17. Her breakout as a musician came in 1962 with the simple, plaintive song Tous les garçons et les filles, when she sang of all the boys and girls walking hand in hand, while I walk alone through the streets, my heart aching. It was an instant hit in France and even broke through in the UK charts. Her style captivated fashion designers, becoming a model for the likes of Yves Saint Laurent and Paco Rabanne, who designed a mini dress out of gold plates for her. Rolling Stones frontman Mick Jagger once famously called her the ideal woman, while fellow singer-songwriter Bob Dylan penned several love letters to her. He addressed her in a poem on the back of his 1964 album Another Side of Bob Dylan. One of her most memorable performances came in 1968 with Comment te dire adieu, a French adaptation by Serge Gainsbourg of a song originally in English, but the Gainsbourg song has since been covered many times, with its painful goodbye to a man with a heart of pirates. She collaborated with a number of artists, including Blur and Iggy Pop. Hardy was also an actor, appearing in films by directors including Jean-Luc Godard, Roger Vadim, and John Frankenheimer, as well as a writer of fiction and non-fiction. Among the topics she wrote about was astrology, which she developed a love for during the 1970s. She was married once to the singer Jacques Dutronc, with whom she had her son Thomas. They separated in the late 1980s, but she would often refer to her ex-husband as the love of her life. Hardy had been ill for some time before her death, revealing in 2004 that she had been diagnosed with lymphoma. In 2015, she was placed in an induced coma for weeks following a fall, and in 2021, she said that she had cancer in one of her ears and felt close to the end of her life. Her career spanned more than 5 decades, during which she released nearly 30 albums. Hardy's last album, Personne d'Autre Nobody Else, was released in 2018. Rolling Stone ranked her at number 162 on its list of the 200 greatest singers of all time in 2023. Among those to pay tribute to Hardy following news of her death was France's culture minister Rachida, who wrote on social media how to say goodbye to her eternal François Hardy, legend of French song, who entered, through her sensitivity, her melodies, into the heart of an entire country. Strictly Come Dancing professional Amy Dowden is to open up about her ordeal with breast cancer in a new BBC documentary. The film, with the working title Amy Dowden, Fight of My Life, will be broadcast on BBC One this summer. It will be shown ahead of her return to Strictly, after she missed last year's series because of her illness. The Welsh dancer was diagnosed in April 2023 at the age of 32 after finding a lump in her breast the day before she went on her honeymoon. It was an exciting new chapter in my life, but finding a lump on my breast changed my life, she said in a statement announcing the documentary. I never thought at my age I would get cancer, and despite having family members and friends who were cancer survivors, had no idea just what the impact on my life would be. I have learnt so much about myself and what a cancer diagnosis means on this journey. I hope others find hope and strength from this film, and that it encourages everyone to check themselves, no matter what age you are. She made the decision to allow cameras to follow her journey with cancer 6 days after her diagnosis, and was filmed over 15 months. After being diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, Dowden had a mastectomy and chemotherapy, along with fertility treatment. She was told in July that the tumours had spread and another type of cancer had been discovered. The dancer didn't compete in last year's Strictly, but was able to take part in the group dance in the final in December. In February, a health check showed there was no evidence of disease. On Monday, it was announced that Dowden from Carefully will return to Strictly's professional lineup for this year's series. She wrote on Instagram that she was so happy and grateful to be back. In 2020, she featured in a documentary about her experience of living with Crohn's disease. She also founded a dance studio in Cradley in the West Midlands in 2016. Breast cancer symptoms and signs. A new lump or area of thickened tissue in either breast that was not there before. A change in the size or shape of one or both breasts. A discharge of fluid from either of your nipples. A lump or swelling in either of your armpits. A change in the look or feel of your skin, such as puckering or dimpling. A rash or redness. A rash like eczema, crusting, scaly or itchy skin or redness on or around your nipple, and a change in the appearance of your nipple, such as being sunken into your breast. Some of these symptoms are common and can be caused by other conditions, but it is still important to get checked by a GP. The third film in the franchise of Paddington in Peru has been revealed. The first 2 were based in London after he had fled Peru because of his home being destroyed by an earthquake. Ben Whishaw will again star as the voice of the marmalade-loving bear, with Aunt Lucy still voiced by Imelda Staunton. Hugh Bonneville, Dame Julie Walters, Madeline Harris and Samuel Joslin also return, but Sally Hawkins has handed the role of Mrs. Brown to Emily Mortimer. Announcing her departure, Hawkins said she loved her time making the first 2 films, but it was the right time to hand the reins over to another, adding, "One can't get much better than the truly wonderful Emily Mortimer. She is extraordinarily special." Another addition to the cast, Olivia Colman, stars as a guitar-playing nun who works at the home for retired bears. She tells Paddington and co. that Aunt Lucy is on some sort of quest. He then embarks on a mission to find her with the help of a boat captain, voiced by another newcomer, Antonio Banderas. Dame Julie Walters returns as Miss Bird in her first film role in 3 years. In 2020, Walters said she had been diagnosed with stage 3 bowel cancer. Last year, she had to pull out of filming forthcoming Channel 4 drama True Love because of severe back pain, to be replaced by Lindsay Duncan. Tesla boss Elon Musk says shareholder votes on a record-breaking payout to the multi-billionaire and a plan to move the firm's legal headquarters to Texas are currently passing by wide margins. Tesla shareholders have been voting on several proposals, including one that could confirm a pay deal for Mr. Musk that was worth $56 billion or £43.8 billion when it was first agreed in 2018. The company is due to make an official announcement on the result of the vote at a meeting on Thursday. In a post on the social platform X, formerly known as Twitter, Mr. Musk thanked his supporters. However, legal experts say it is not clear if a court that blocked the deal will accept the revote, which is not binding and allow the company to restore the pay package. Earlier this year, a Delaware judge voted the compensation deal after a small investor sued. The judge ruled the sum was unfair and the process for determining the package by a board dominated by Mr. Musk was deeply flawed. Tesla called the decision fundamentally unfair and inconsistent with the will of the stockholders. The company then submitted the deal to another vote and asked its shareholders to back a plan to reincorporate the company outside the state of Delaware. The board has said that Mr. Musk deserves the package because Tesla achieved its ambitious targets under his leadership and that it is necessary to ensure he remains dedicated to the company. Tesla executives also expressed support for the package in social media posts, saying that Mr. Musk is crucial to the company's success. Meanwhile, Mr. Musk promised a personal tour of Tesla's factory in Texas to some shareholders who cast votes. The package, worth an estimated 300 times what the top earning boss in the US made last year, won backing from 73% of shareholders who voted 6 years ago. Children's cartoon character Bluey has caused headaches for a council trying to arrange a general election count in East Sussex. Brighton Hove City Council had hoped to book the Brighton Centre from the 3rd to the 5th of July, but officials were left scratching their heads after learning the venue was already booked for Bluey's big play. The city's election count will instead be held 5 miles away or 8 kilometres at Portslade Sports Centre, meaning customers will be unable to use the facility during the count period. The sports centre will be closed to customers from the 3rd to the 5th of July, with its members being given access to other gyms and studios across the city during the closure. The council is responsible for organising general election counts and usually holds them at the Brighton Centre. It had tried to book the venue from the 3rd to the 5th of July to set up the counting tables and host the count itself after people go to the polls on the 4th of July, but was unable to do so. Instead, the Brighton Centre will host Bluey's Big Play, a live theatre adaptation of the hit children's television show Bluey, for 6 shows from the 5th to the 7th of July. A spokesperson for the council said that the calling of the snap election by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak meant we had to find a suitable venue in a short space of time. We looked at other venues in the city, but none are as suitable as the sports centre, which will be able to hold 500 people and 150 count tables, has good accessibility, large areas for declaring winners and accommodating the media. We know the closure of the sports centre will cause inconvenience to some of our residents and customers, but we hope everyone can understand the reasons. The UK economy failed to grow in April after particularly wet weather put off shoppers and slowed down construction. The official data is what most economists had expected and comes after the fastest growth in 2 years from January to March and the recession from the final half of last year. The economy is a key battleground in the run-up to the general election on the 4th of July, with the main parties debating whether the latest numbers point to a continued recovery or stagnation. The Conservatives argue they show the economy has turned a corner, while Labour say they expose the damage done. The Office for National Statistics (ONS) figures show spending on services, which includes everything from hairdressers to hospitality, grew for the 4th month in a row. However, this was offset by falls in production and in the construction industry. The UK's gross domestic product, GDP, which measures the value of goods and services produced in the country over time, had grown 0.4% in March. Some parts of the service industry performed better than others. The information, communication and scientific sector grew the most, while shop trade fell. The ONS said some retail businesses told them their output was dented because of the wetter weather, with rainfall for the month well above the long-term average. However, it added that it was difficult to quantify the same impact on the rainfall. Output and services for consumers, many of whom are still struggling to cope with steep rises in the cost of living, fell by 0.7%. Economists do also warn against placing too much weight on shifts in economic activity over 1 month because they can be affected by factors like the weather or the timing of the Easter holidays. Over the 3 months to April, the economy grew by 0.7% from February to April. The Bank of England will look at the figures alongside a range of others next Thursday when it meets to decide what to do about the interest rate. Most economists do not believe Wednesday's update will sway the decision much though, as it was broadly in line with expectations. Many people are struggling not only with higher energy and food bills, but with higher mortgage payments as interest rates have gone up, which the central bank has increased in a bid to tackle price rises. US video game retailer GameStop says it has raised more than $2 billion, or £1.57 billion, in its second share sale in a month after a rally led by investment influencer Keith Gill, known as Roaring Kitty. The announcement comes just days after Mr. Gill's first YouTube livestream in 3 years. The company's shares jumped by almost 23% on Tuesday and have doubled in the last 6 months. GameStop's popularity among retail investors during the pandemic helped coin the idea of meme stocks, those that gained popularity through sites like Reddit. Stocks that often became popular were ones that had been heavily bet against by professional investors, such as hedge funds. As a result, some of these shares saw their prices rise and fall sharply in a hugely volatile trade. In an announcement to the New York Stock Exchange on Tuesday, GameStop said it had sold all 75 million shares it had offered to investors, raising $2.137 billion. Over the last month, the firm has raised a total of more than $3 billion through share sales as its stock market value jumped. That includes $933.4 million GameStop raised by selling 45 million shares last month. Shares in the firm jumped earlier this month after a screenshot was shared via a Reddit account tied to Mr. Gill, claiming he owed 5 million GameStop shares, a holding worth more than $100 million. Mr. Gill became famous in 2021 for inspiring an army of online investors to back GameStop. It led to an unexpected surge in the struggling firm's shares, creating a financial squeeze on professional Wall Street firms that had bet against the retailer. A post from that year showed Mr. Gill held about 200,000 shares, worth $30.9 million. Other so-called meme stocks, including cinema chain AMC and technology firm BlackBerry, also saw their shares price jump during the pandemic. GameStop is currently trading at around $30 a share, well below the record high of $48 a share they reached earlier in June. Pauline Black-Oby has paid tribute to her bandmate from the Selecter, Arthur Gaps Hendrickson, who died of cancer at the age of 73. The two-tone band formerly in Coventry in 1979, and their debut album Too Much Pressure was released a year later. Black said he was extraordinary when he used to do James Bond. I've never seen anybody as powerful on the stage. He was absolutely fantastic. We used to call each other the Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers of SKA. It really fitted in a weird way what we did. Black described Hendrickson as a really fine songwriter, and it believed he was always thinking of his childhood in the Caribbean in St. Kitts when writing music. I feel so much that people don't know the real Gaps, Black said. I don't know a more humble man. She said he was a gentleman to everybody he ever met. Hendrickson was brought up by his grandmother in St. Kitts, where she would take him to the cane fields before school to cut cane for an hour. When he was 12, Black said his parents sent for him in the UK and was on his own for the journey due to a misunderstanding. Black said he was just standing on the harbour side and the harbour master said to him, "Come on lad, we'll get you somewhere, don't be scared," and gave him a Kit Kat. That was the first time he ever tasted chocolate, and he thought it was absolutely wonderful. She added she was told by his grandmother the streets in England were paved with gold, and was bitterly disappointed when he arrived as he had taken her at her word. As his grandmother had sold ice in the Caribbean to make money, Black said when it snowed all over the pavement, he thought he was going to be rich because he could collect all this ice and sell it to people. That's who he was. It was the most beautiful innocence and naivety, but in that best sense that you could be wonder with the world, and that was really him, and that's why it was shared on stage. Speaking of his contribution to the two-tone and SKA movement, Black said he was extraordinary, take too much pressure. He took that song and all the angst and frustration of the working man, what he'd been. He'd worked at Vauxhall in Luton, and he'd come here to do much the same in a different factory. He was channeling that for everybody, for other people who'd come here from the Caribbean. It was a hard life with little opportunity, much more racism at that time, hard to get a job. He took all that onto the stage and presented that. That's why people remember that song and his particular rendition, because you really felt that. Black visited Hendrickson in hospital on Thursday before flying out to perform 2 gigs in America with their other bandmates. We knew this was going to happen, but when it finally happens, it's dreadful. Fortunately, we had some time before we went to America. We probably knew that was going to be the last time. Sometimes you just have to say things to people maybe you've never said before. Black had planned to go straight back to the hospital to see Hendrickson on returning from America, but their flight arrived 4 hours after he died. Gaps was a religious man. He was not your average Christian, but he was always quoting at me, "You'll be fine, you'll get saved, don't worry. You've got me to talk to." He would often quote from the book of John to her. She said, "In my father's house as are many mansions. If I were told not to do so, I go to prepare a place for you." That was always what he said to me, and I hope he's found it, and if there is a hereafter, I hope I can join him and we can all be in it together. All those people of the SKA world who have gone just doing some SKA. The US Federal Reserve has signaled that it will cut its key interest rate just once this year despite inflation easing. Back in March, the central bank has been expected to reduce borrowing costs 3 times by the end of 2024. However, on Wednesday, new forecasts from Fed officials who make decisions on rates penciled in a single reduction. The new outlook emerged after the Fed voted to hold interest rates at their current 23-year high, even as inflation ticked lower. Inflation, which measures the pace of price rises, slowed to 3.3% in the year to May. That compares with 3.4% in the 12 months to April. However, between April and May, inflation was unchanged and remains above the Fed's 2% target. Jerome Powell, chair of the Federal Reserve, said that only modest progress has been made on hitting the target and the central bank would need to see good inflation readings before interest rates can be cut. US interest rates were held at 5.25% to 5.5%. Anastasia Fedick, assistant professor of finance at Haas Business School at the University of California at Berkeley, said, "We did get some good news in terms of better inflation numbers, but the Fed is still being pretty cautious, so they're signaling that in the future they're going to be doing one most likely rate drop and not a very large one at that." Some analysts suggested that the central bank would backtrack on the number of interest rate cuts this year. Ian Shepardson, chief economist at Pantheon Macroeconomics, said that reducing forecasts of interest rate cuts from 3 to 1 this year was unnecessarily aggressive, while economists at Wells Fargo said it would be a close call between making 1 or 2 reductions in 2024. Forecasts from the US Fed signaled one modest cut to 5% to 5.25%. Mr. Powell acknowledged that a reduction of this size would not have a major impact on the US economy, but he said when it finally does come, it would be a consequential decision for the economy, which you want to get right. While inflation eased a little, the US unemployment market remains robust. Recent data showed that US employers added 272,000 jobs in May, far above the 185,000 expected. Ms. Fedick said the Fed is trying to react to the data, but not overreact to the data. Some other major economies have cut interest rates, including the European Central Bank and the Bank of Canada, but the US and the UK are yet to make a similar move. The Bank of England will meet next week and is widely expected to hold interest rates at 5.25%, the highest level for 16 years. The Consumer Prices Index measure of inflation has slowed significantly in the UK from a high of 11.1% in October 2022 to 2.3% currently. However, some elements of inflation remain stubbornly high. At the same time, average wage growth in the UK remains strong compared to inflation. Cooperative bank customers have reacted angrily after a glitch meant payments were taken twice from some small business accounts. Customers took to social media to complain, with some asking whether the bank has been hacked and one claiming he was £5,000 down. Co-op Bank said it was aware of a small number of business account holders affected and was working to correct the issue. "We apologise for any inconvenience caused and are supporting customers during this period." According to its website, Co-op Bank has about 3.1 million retail customers and 96,000 small business customers. The lender said that duplicate historical transactions have been appearing in some business customer balances. Customers have reacted with alarm over the missing money, with some claiming they had been pushed them into their overdrafts. One tweeted, "Utter shambles regarding duplicate historical transactions being taken from customer accounts without any notification from you this has happened. Thousands of pounds out of people's accounts without even notifying customers. Tell us how this will be resolved." Someone else said, "I checked my balance after not being able to buy some petrol to notice that I had massively overdrawn and have double transactions going out from weeks ago." Some have complained of long waits to get through to the bank. On its ex-account, Co-op Bank apologised for the distress caused and urged people in financial difficulty to call its business team. The bank has 50 branches across the UK and about 3,400 staff. It was part of the wider Co-op group more than 10 years ago, before splintering off when it fell into deep financial difficulty. In late May, it agreed to be bought out by Coventry Building Society for £780 million in a deal that will turn it to a mutual structure. The UK should follow Scotland's lead on raising taxes to avoid spending cuts and austerity, SNP leader John Swinney has said. He told Nick Robinson that Labour had signed up to £18 billion of cuts planned by the Conservatives, a claim denied by Sir Keir Starmer's party. Mr Swinney said higher tax rates, like those in Scotland where anyone earning above £28,850 pays more than elsewhere in the UK, would close that fiscal gap. He urged Scottish voters to back the SNP because it was crystal clear Labour would win in England and his party would best protect Scotland's interests at Westminster. The £18 billion figure quoted by Mr Swinney is a reference to work by the Institute for Fiscal Studies, IFS. IFS research economist B. Boley has described it as a fair assessment of the kind of cuts some UK government departments might face each year by the end of the next Parliament, although she added there was some uncertainty about their precise scale. Mr Swinney accused Labour of not being open with people about the financial pressures coming down the line. Asked what he would do if he were Prime Minister, he said, "I would replicate the tax changes we made in Scotland in the rest of the UK, and that would essentially address the £18 billion fiscal gap. In Scotland, people earning below £28,850 pay slightly less tax than the rest of the UK, but above that figure they pay increasingly more. Someone on £50,000 in Scotland, which includes some teachers and police officers, pays £1,542 more than they would in the rest of the UK. That rises to £3,346 for someone on £100,000. Mr Swinney said that those who paid the extra tax benefited from things such as free university tuition and free prescriptions as a result. Responding to Mr Swinney's claims about Labour being committed to Tory cuts, Shadow Scotland Secretary Ian Murray insisted there will be no austerity under Labour. He said Labour would deliver economic stability, treat public finances with respect, and give public services a badly needed funding boost. Mr Murray added, "We will raise specific taxes for those with the broadest shoulders to put an immediate injection of cash into public services and grow our economy to put our country's finances on a sustainable footing in the long term." Until a few weeks ago, Mr Swinney had stepped back from front politics, but the resignation of Humza Yousaf propelled him from the backbenches at Hollywood into the top job in Scottish politics. An SNP stalwart, he first held office when the SNP came to power 17 years ago. During the interview, he was shown a photo of him with Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond and was described as one of the three musketeers of the SNP. He was asked if he really represented the change of political leadership that a recent poll suggested many voters were seeking. "I think what the people are saying is that they're concerned about the issues that affect their lives, about the cost of living, about the challenges of their public services, about the implications of Brexit, for example." Mr Swinney accepted his party had gone through a tough time, with 3 leaders in 2 years, a police investigation into party funds, and criticism of its record on education and the NHS. "That's why I'm here. I'm here to sort it out, to strengthen the SNP, and to build the trust with the electorate, and that's exactly what I'm doing." Mr Swinney was challenged on his pursuit of Scottish independence, which some analysis suggests could intensify the austerity he has warned against. The IFS, the same organisation whose figures he has used to attack Labour, has predicted an independent Scotland would have to impose bigger spending cuts or tax rises in its first decade. The SNP leader replied that an independent Scotland would have more flexibility and manoeuvrability to improve our economic performance. He also restated his position that a simple majority of MPs in Scotland would be a mandate to open immediate negotiations to bring about independence, but he said everyone accepts the best way to go about this is through a second independence referendum. The SNP leader was also pressed on an apparent softening of his party's positioning on granting new oil, gas and gas drilling licences in the North Sea. It is a power reserved to Westminster, and Labour has proposed a ban on granting new licences. One of his predecessors as First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, described the granting of a licence for the Rosebank field by the Conservatives as the greatest environmental vandalism of her lifetime. But Mr Swinney said new applications should be considered on a case-by-case basis and assessed to see if they were compatible with climate change objectives. While not ruling out support for some new licences, he criticised the scale of Conservative backing for further exploration. The Prime Minister has basically said he will license 100 new projects, I think that is utterly irresponsible. That is climate denier status of the first order. At the same time, he said he was not prepared to allow the oil sector in northeast Scotland to be devastated in the manner of Scottish heavy industry when Margaret Thatcher was in power in the 1980s. Mr. Swinney was also asked about the amount of effort and time that had been spent on legislation making it easier for people to change gender. A new law was passed at the Scottish Parliament but blocked by the UK government on grounds that it impacted on the UK-wide equality legislation, a position later upheld by the courts. Mr. Swinney said it was up to the incoming government to decide if it would maintain its opposition to the Scottish legislation. We've got to be absolutely focused, making sure that we protect the rights of women and girls as we wrestle with all these issues. But he said the greatest challenges facing the transgender community also have to be understood. I want to bring people together. The European Automobile Manufacturers Association, or ACEA, unites Europe's 15 major car, truck, van and bus makers. They are the voice of the auto industry, a technological world leader and the backbone of the EU economy. Their members keep Europe on the move, providing diverse solutions for moving people and goods from A to B. Together, they are progressing on the road to zero commission and zero fatality transport, and are addressing major technology shifts and the changing mobility needs of Europeans. ACEA is working towards a new era of mobility, where all Europeans can access affordable transport solutions that are green and clean, smart and efficient, and safe and reliable. Their aim is to provide Europe's mobility transformation while at the same time ensuring that the auto industry remains a strong global competitive player. The ACEA acts as one with common industry positions that also reflect the overarching interests of European citizens, transport users and operators, and auto industry workers. They bring their collective expertise to policymakers, sharing a wealth of factual information to enable well-informed decisions. They foster a societal debate about mobility and are open to working with all interested parties to advance the common aim of clean, smart and safe mobility. The European Automobile Manufacturers Association was founded in 1991 under the French name L'Association des Constructeurs Européens d'Automobile, which explains the widely used and recognized acronym still in use today as ACEA. 3 decades ago, its founding members were BMW, DAF, Daimler-Benz, Fiat, Ford, General Motors Europe, MAN, Porsche, Renault, Rolls-Royce, Rover, Saab Scania, Volkswagen, Volvo Car and AB Volvo. In more recent years, they have also opened their doors to non-European manufacturers, with significant production and research facilities in the EU. For thousands of young people, the 4th of July will be their first time voting in a general election. Among their key issues are climate change and university fees, but will they even cast a vote? Brighton Hove and Sussex Sixth Form College SBIC has been educating students on the importance of using their vote. Student voting campaigner Shahama said she was concerned politicians did not take young people seriously and some policies impact them directly. Ms. Abbott said there is a lot of legislation that impacts predominantly young people, even solely young people, and you can see that they're doing for the benefit of older voters, which is a bit of a snub really. Ms. Abbott added that young people were not considered properly by politicians because we don't turn up to vote. So it's a bit of a vicious cycle really. Busy Girl has plans to go to university after she finishes her A-levels and said she registered to vote as soon as she turned 18. Most important to me at the moment is talking about student loans and university tuition fees, as well as the larger questions like housing and the jobs market. All of these things are so pertinent to young people, but I feel like they aren't actually talked about enough. Oliver Cornish already voted in the police and crime commissioner elections, which he described as quite underwhelming, to be honest. He said that climate change was important to him, but he thinks climate issues are sort of taped onto the bottom of a manifesto for politicians. When you have massive intergovernmental bodies using terms like it's a code red for humanity and talking about climate change in these massive existential level terms, it can feel like the government doesn't quite understand. Jocelyn Ryan is also a student voting campaigner. She said, "We're a very politically active generation. You've seen it with the Black Lives Matter movements. With our Extension Rebellion involvement, 18-year-olds now need to take that formal step into politics." Millie Brown said political parties have been engaging with young people online. She said, "I've definitely seen the political parties reaching out more on social media, like they're trying to reach young audiences through joking and memes and stuff." Jonathan Cox from Citizens UK said, "In our experience, Young people are not apathetic about the issues, they're often apathetic or have a sense of hopelessness or powerlessness about the processes themselves. When you enable young people to connect the things they're passionate about, the things they want to change with the democratic process, you suddenly see that apathy begin to disappear. A university student said that taking part in a challenge to cover 200 kilometers, 124 miles, in a month made her feel like her dad had returned to her 12 years after he died from a brain tumour. Charlotte Greatorex, 21 from Toddington, Bedfordshire, completed the challenge for brain tumour research to honour Greatorex, who died 2 months after his diagnosis when she was 9. During May, she walked, ran and took part in sprint classes, and she covered 226 kilometres or 140 miles. She felt like he was with her at times, as she regularly saw robins. I always think that when you see a robin nearby, a loved one is nearby. Miss Greatorex, who has just finished her second year studying psychology and criminology at De Montfort University, Leicester, said she wanted to throw herself into the challenge that would raise funds for brain tumour research and honour my dad. It was a welcome release from her exams, and she said, "It was amazing for my mental health. There was a lot of reflection time. I just love being outside," she added. "My dad loved wildlife, so being out with the wildlife brought me back to him. I always think that when you see a robin nearby, a loved one is nearby, and I had a few run-ins with some robins." She raised hundreds of pounds for important funding for research into brain tumours. "I'm very proud of myself, and I think my dad would be very proud as well. And I'm very proud of just being able to bring a memory back to his name and keeping him alive in that way." When we lose someone, you're always a little bit worried that they'll be forgotten, so to be able to do this, I've been able to keep his name alive. Jonas Brothers star Kevin Jonas has revealed he had a cancerous mole removed from his face. The guitarist and singer spoke about his diagnosis on Instagram in a short video. "So today I'm getting a basal cell carcinoma removed from my head," he said, showing followers the mole on his forehead. "Yes, that is an actual little skin cancer guy that just started to grow. And now I've just to get surgery to remove it, so here we go." He then did a quick update after the operation, saying it was time to heal and go home. Basal cell carcinoma is the most common type of skin cancer, and according to the NHS, treatment for such non-melanoma skin cancers is successful in 90% of cases. Melanoma skin cancer is less common and usually more serious than non-melanoma skin cancer. In the caption to the video, Jonas gave his followers a friendly reminder to get their moles checked. The NHS says the main symptoms of non-melanoma skin cancer is a growth or unusual patch on the skin. Any part of your skin can be affected, but it's most common in areas exposed to the sun. The growths or patches can vary in colour, size and texture, and cancerous patches can be a range of colours including purple, brown and red. Overexposures to ultraviolet light from the sun, as well as artificial tanning, sunbeds and sun lamps are the main cause of non-melanoma skin cancer. Other risk factors that can increase your chances of developing non-melanoma skin cancer include previous non-melanoma skin cancer, a family history of skin cancer, pale skin that burns easily, large number of moles or freckles, taking medicine that suppresses your immune system, and a coexisting medical condition that suppresses your immune system. Vitaly Klitschko was only a year into his retirement from boxing when he was elected mayor of Ukrainian capital Kiev in 2014. 8 years later, the former heavyweight champion found himself desperately trying to hold his city together as Russia invaded the country. A new documentary follows Klitschko together with younger brother and fellow boxer Vladimir as he uses his fame to campaign for military support and raise funding in the face of Russian aggression. Klitschko More Than a Fight, which opened the Sheffield Documentary Festival on Wednesday, explores the challenges he faced in a war that is still ongoing. "I wanted to make a film about two celebrities who are using their celebrity to reach a really wide audience," the film's director Kevin MacDonald says. "And I was lucky that the two celebrities didn't have to be pop singers or something. They are fighters to their core, and obviously the metaphor is hard to resist, of them fighting in the ring and then fighting for their country." The documentary features new interviews with both brothers, who speak openly about how their high profile has helped them in the war effort. "Most of us don't know the names of many presidents around the world," Vitaly says in the film, "but the names of world heavyweight champions are known to almost everyone on the planet. Sport has opened so many doors for us. The Klitschko brothers dominated boxing for a decade. Both were world heavyweight champions, and between them they fought 40 title bouts." Following his retirement, Vitaly was elected Kiev's mayor on a pro-European manifesto, winning its support for his campaign against corruption after rising through the city's political ranks during the 2014 revolution. but he faced his greatest challenge when Vladimir Putin ordered the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. The documentary began filming the following winter. I was really driven, MacDonald explains. It's the first time I've ever made a film out of political conviction and just wanting to do something to communicate the horror of what was going on. But the film also spools back to the brothers' boxing careers, examining their rise and shining a spotlight on the bond between them. Jumping between their sporting history and the war of the past 2 years, MacDonald says provided some tonal variation to a portrait that is so often bleak. Vitaly's day-to-day life in the city is very repetitive, the director explains. He's attending meetings, begging for money, going abroad, begging for arms, visiting a building that's been destroyed. So we then started to look more into their past, and that became fascinating, learning what drove him into politics. In an era when the news agenda moves quickly and coverage of conflicts decreases after the initial weeks, Klitschko's platform helps him keep the war on the radar. While Vitaly often isn't able to leave the city, Vladimir regularly travels abroad to drum up support, something that has given the younger Klitschko brother a new perspective. Before February the 24th, I thought I knew myself, but I was wrong, he says in the film, referring to the start of the war in 2022. What you have achieved in your life, awards, medals, is so unimportant. Now the only question is, what can I do for Ukraine? Unlike his brother, he sees himself as an activist rather than a politician, helping to deliver humanitarian and military help for the country. Their close bond is evident throughout the film. I was born, he was there, notes Vladimir. I don't even know the time without him. They're incredibly close, MacDonald agrees, but they're very different. Vitaly, when you first meet him, seems quite serious and stern, a disciplinarian. But the more time you spend with him, you realise that he's got an incredible brain, and is also very warm and welcoming. Whereas Vladimir is I don't want to say party boy, but on first meeting he's incredibly friendly and open and chatty and wants to have a good time. And also, I've never seen a bond like this where they ask each other about everything and help each other out. The filmmaker says it took quite a few months to chip away at Vitaly's granite exterior, but the longer they spent filming, the more he opened up. It's clear from the film that Vitaly is an instinctive fighter and feels an affinity with those on the front line. If I wasn't there, it would be me in the place, he says. The documentary doesn't shy away from disputes with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. At one point, when residents of Kiev are left without power for up to 30 hours, Zelensky says he expects better from the mayor's office and says they're not doing enough. Meanwhile, the mayor suggests Zelensky is becoming an autocrat in comments that pick up news coverage around the world. The pair are from opposing political parties, although their policies are not actually that different. One journalist in the film says they don't like each other, and because Zelensky saw Vitaly as the bigger celebrity, he was a bigger threat than the other politicians. We thought long and hard about whether to include that stuff. It's journalistically fascinating, but is this damaging to people's perception of Ukraine? I didn't want it to be, but I thought it was indicative, the fact that they have this open dispute and that they slag each other off in the media, to me is a sign that Ukraine is a democracy. Zelensky's team did not respond to the documentary's team's request to take part or comment, but Mikhailo Podolyak, an advisor to the president, sat for an interview. Here, many people who get a certain position of power overestimate their importance. Many of them become addicted to the thrill of success or failure. In Mr. Klitschko's case, he clearly has ambitions to compete for the top job. Later in the film, Vitaly is asked directly whether he does indeed have ambitions to become Ukraine's president, and he gives a classic politician's non-answer answer, which I take to mean yes. But the director is in no doubt that Klitschko's intentions are primarily in the best interests of this country. Vitaly is 100% doing the best for his city and his country. I have nothing but admiration for the way this man works, sleeps night after sleeps night, getting up in the middle of the night endlessly to go where he has been bombed, or driving hours across the country to go and deliver drones and sleeping in the car. He is so dedicated and he leads this very frugal, almost monastic life. There's no pomp or show. MacDonald says he did not feel in any danger while filming in Ukraine, and praises an app that alerts citizens when there is an incoming missile attack, giving them a few minutes to get to safety. We are mostly sleeping in the basement, he says. Instead, the main thing he felt was just exhaustion. He says Russian often times the attacks through the night, so Ukrainians' sleep is interrupted. So the whole population is slightly punch-drunk from tiredness. I was so amazed that Ukrainians didn't complain about that. They're obviously more resilient than me. Although news coverage of the war continues, it has naturally fallen away from the headlines the longer it has gone on. I hope this film plays a part in putting it back up there and making people interested again. That's the goal of this film. The US has broadened its sanctions on Russia, including a fresh crackdown on banks dealing with sanctioned entities. It expands a December program to target foreign banks deemed to be aiding Russia's war effort in Ukraine. The US also placed sanctions on the Moscow Stock Exchange, leading to it halt trading in dollars and euros. It also moved to try to restrict Russia's use of technology, including chips and software. US President Joe Biden signed an executive order in December that imposed sanctions on banks dealing with about 1,200 individuals and companies deemed to be helping Russia's war machine. Those measures, which expose banks to the risk of being cut off from the US financial system, have now been expanded to about 4,500 entities. The US will also target on gold laundering. Peter Harrell, a former White House senior director for international economics, has said that the US is shifting towards something that begins to look like an effort to set up a global financial embargo on Russia. As part of this effort, the US Treasury announced that it would impose sanctions on parts of Russia's financial system, including the Moscow Exchange, which is one of Russia's main stock exchanges. The stock exchange, which is Russia's largest foreign exchange market, said the sanctions had forced it to stop trading in dollars and euros. The US also focused on technology. Chips and other technology made in the US have been found in downed Russian equipment on Ukraine battlefields, including drones, radios, missiles, and armored vehicles. The sanctions aim to make it more difficult for companies to supply that tech. The US will target shell firms in Hong Kong selling chips to Russia. In addition, software and IT services will also be restricted, although the US said its actions are not intended to disrupt civil society and civil telecommunications. Despite the wave of sanctions brought against Russia since its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, the International Monetary Fund predicts that the country will record economic growth of 3.2% this year. But analysts said the measures will eventually make it harder for Moscow to wage its war, and over time weaken Russia's economy. Russia's war economy is deeply isolated from the international financial system, leaving the Kremlin's military desperate for access to the outside world, said Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. Today's actions strike at their remaining avenues for international materials and equipment, including their reliance on critical supplies from third countries. The US announced the decision as Mr. Biden prepared for a G7 summit in southern Italy with the leaders of the UK, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan. One of the G7 leaders' prioritizes is boosting support for Ukraine, which is now into its third year of resisting Russia's invasion. The head teacher and founder of an independent school has blamed Conservative and Labour policies for its forthcoming closure after 40 years. Elizabeth Lafferty-Shaw said the number of pupils at Downham Preparatory School in Downham Market, Norfolk, had never recovered to pre-pandemic levels, falling from about 120 to just 40. She said that many parents could no longer afford the £7,000 annual fees due to mortgage interest rate rises following the government's 2022 mini-budget, and that many feared rising fees should Labour win the general election. "It's heartbreaking and I'm angry," said Miss Lafferty-Sharp. She said some circumstances affecting the school, including the COVID pandemic, were beyond anyone's control, but some of them, like ridiculous interest rates or having to pay £4,000 a month for electricity, that could have been managed better. She said Labour's plans to charge private schools 20% value-added tax, VAT, as well as ending business rate relief, were the last straw. The party hopes the moves will raise about £1.7 billion to be invested into state schools. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer previously denied the policy was an attack on the independent sector, but said he wanted state schools to be just as good. Conservative Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, meanwhile, has criticised the plans, saying that they showed Labour did not understand the aspirations of hard-working families. Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey has said he never thought, in principle, that VAT should be applied to education. This school has plans to mark its 40th birthday with a party before shutting this summer. The news has come as a shock to parents, including Hannah Doy, who is a child at the school and another in its nursery, which will stay open. She said her son struggled at his state school and ended up at Downham Prep after a number of exclusions. He was a very angry and happy child. He's come here and he is absolutely thriving. Academically, he's caught up after a year and a half of being out of the classroom. He's a happy boy, he has a group of friends, which he didn't have before. It's changed our lives, so we are absolutely devastated that the school is closing. Freya, aged 9, said in some schools there are bullies, but in this school there are no bullies at all. It's such a small school, it's just really friendly. Miss Lafferty-Sharp said many parents of pupils which had special educational needs and that their parents had turned to private schools because they could not find an appropriate space in a state school. Norfolk County Council said a very small number of children at the school had special educational needs and it was confident it would find alternative places for them. It said it was processing applications from 25 other families and would let them know the outcome before the end of June. 1,000 BTS fans will queue in Seoul on Thursday for a hug from Jin, who is back to his role as K-pop idol after 18 months of military service. The 3-hour marathon is his first public event since being discharged from the army on Wednesday. The 1,000 who will be embraced were chosen in a raffle, although Jin has said he has suggested hugging up to 3,000 fans. "I'm so happy now that I'll meet Jin," says Ms. Park, who learned last weekend that she had won a spot in Thursday's Hugathon. "I didn't expect to win, I couldn't believe it, so all weekend I kept checking over and over again," says the 30-year-old, who did not wish to reveal her first name. She said it started to feel real only when she started packing to travel to the capital. Jin, age 31, who is the oldest member of the hit boy band, was drafted in December 2022. He served as an assistant drill instructor at a training center for the South Korean military, which requires all able-bodied men to serve. Jin is the first BTS member to be discharged from duty. The other 6, J-Hope, V, RM, Jimin, Jungkook, and Suga, are still serving, and the band is expected to reunite only in June 2025. But the others took time off on Wednesday to celebrate Jin's return. Fans are already agog over images of their brief reunion on Wednesday. Jin kicked off his return to the music scene with a live stream where he spoke to fans. "Thank you for waiting for me. I love you. I will try to express my feelings tomorrow." Thursday's hugs will be followed by another event with 3,000 others, where Jin will perform songs on request and share messages with fans. Vanessa May Leterio, age 25, didn't get lucky in the raffle, but she made it to the second round and flew from the Philippines to attend. "I cried when I learned the result since I prayed very hard for a winning slot," she said. "It was definitely hard to win since it was me versus thousands of the armies, which are the BTS fan group, who wanted to join." Miss Park, on the other hand, is both excited and worried. Hugging 1,000 people for 3 hours is difficult even if Jin became more fit in the military. She said many fans want Hybe, the band's manager, which is also behind the event, to invite fewer fans for hugs. They also wanted them to vet the attendees. "Someone could approach him pretending to be a fan. We fans are constantly worried for the artist's health and safety." The event also drew backlash for its qualification rules, which required fans to join ARMY, which reportedly has more than 25 million members. They also had to buy BTS albums on a designated website to enter the raffle. The more albums they bought, the higher their chances of being hugged. But this caused an uproar, and Hybe was accused of using the event to sell unsold albums. The agency eventually apologized and loosened the criteria to allow anyone who had ever purchased certain BTS albums. Jin addresses the controversy in his livestream on Wednesday. "This is something that the company and I prepared in good intention, so please understand." To fans, Jin's return is also the beginning of BTS's return from a forced hiatus. But the question industry insiders are asking is whether the world's most famous boy band can be as successful after a pause. "BTS will be perceived as older," says music critic Lim Ki-yeon, but he doesn't think this will necessarily hurt the band's image. "BTS has been active for more than a decade. They will not attract new young fans who will find them fresh, but their existing fan base will go for them. They're growing old with the band." Fans seem to agree. "I think that shouldn't be a problem between armies and BTS," says 20-year-old Samantha, who did not win the chance to hug Jin, but will attend the second part of Thursday's event. She's been following the band since she was 10 and doesn't see that changing anytime soon. "I like their music, then not their popularity." An invasive species of mosquito has set up homes in 13 countries in the EU, including France, Spain, and Greece, with experts linking their presence to a rise in dengue fever in Europe. Climate change is creating favourable conditions for the tiger mosquito to spread, said the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control, ECDC. As far north as Paris, where the Olympic Games will take place at the end of July, authorities have been monitoring and trapping the insect. The ECDC has warned international travel will further increase the risk of more European outbreaks. It has advised people to remove stagnant water from gardens or balconies where mosquitoes can breed and use repellent as well as screens on windows and doors. Mosquitoes have become a growing threat in Europe over the past 2 decades. The Asian tiger mosquito Aedes albopictus, which is thought to be the most invasive species of mosquito in the world, is now spreading across Europe from its southern European base camp. It has become established in Austria, Bulgaria, Croatia, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Italy, Malta, Portugal, Romania, Slovenia, and Spain, according to the ECDC. It has also been recorded in Belgium, Cyprus, Czechia, the Netherlands, and Slovakia. Tiger mosquitoes spread disease such as dengue fever, chikungunya, and Zika virus, which until recently were typically only present in parts of Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Another mosquito, Aedes aegypti, which transmits yellow fever, as well as other diseases, has set up home in Cyprus. Experts say its potential for spreading to other parts of Europe is concerning given its preference for biting humans and its ability to transmit disease. Dengue starts with flu-like symptoms but can become serious and in some cases fatal. Mass outbreaks have been rising in recent years. Last year, an incidence of multiple infections recorded in France, 4 in Italy, and 2 in Spain. Most European cases are imported, a reflection of the international movement of people and trade, with imported cases soaring to nearly 5,000 last year. But locally acquired infections are also rising. 130 people were affected in 2023, up from 71 the year before. West Nile virus, which is also transmitted by mosquitoes, is now present in more European regions than ever before. One person was reported to be infected by the virus in southern Spain at the start of March, highlighting how climate conditions are creating a suitable environment for mosquitoes even very early in the year. Europe is already seeing how climate change is creating more favourable conditions for invasive mosquitoes to spread into previously unaffected areas and infect more people with diseases such as dengue. Increased international travel from dengue epidemic countries will also increase the risk of imported cases and inevitably also the risk of local outbreaks. Ms. Amon advises people take personal protective measures, adding that early detection of cases, timely surveillance, further research and awareness-raising activities are paramount in those areas in Europe most at risk. Dengue fever is endemic in more than 100 countries around the world, according to the World Health Organization, with more than 6 million cases and 7,000 deaths reported last year. The highest number of cases occur in Bangladesh, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. Malaria is the most commonly deadly mosquito-borne disease on the planet. It spreads to people through the bites of infected female mosquitoes, called anopheles, which have also been found in Europe. There are concerns incidents of malaria could also spike on the continent in the future if conditions are right. The band, formerly known as Easy Life, have changed their name to Hard Life after a threat of legal action by the brand owners of airline EasyJet. Last year, the indie band said Easy Group was suing them because their name was too similar. We felt angry and powerless, Maury Matchverse has said, but if our name affects them that much, I'll walk away from it because it's not worth it. Easy Group has said it would have been unfair to let the band use the Easy brand name without royalty payments. The Leicester band announcement their new name and a new single, Tears, on Tuesday evening. The band, which Matchverse formed in 2017, has 5 members. They found themselves locked in a battle with Easy Group last year, after the company said the band had promoted their Life's a Beach tour in 2021 and 2022, with a poster showing a plane in the style of EasyJet's orange livery, but substituting the airline's name for their own group. In its claim lodging with the High Court, Easy Group also said the band had produced T-shirts bearing their name in the company's branded style, and their website infringed its trademark with its similarity to EasyJet branding. Easy Group said other companies paid to use its brand name. We cannot allow others to simply use it free, gratis, and for nothing, a spokesperson said at the time. That would be unfair. In October, the band said they were going to stop using the name Easy Life following the legal threat, and they played their final show under their old name at Coco in London on the 13th of October. In an exclusive interview, they said the row was the weirdest, most surreal thing that had happened to him. I mean, it's absolutely nuts. We didn't get into music to fight huge corporations in legal battles, obviously. The band said they could not afford to take the matter to court, but now he was over it. The name doesn't change anything, it doesn't change who I am as an artist. We made our peace with it. And when it came to deciding a new name, there had been no question what to choose. All of us unanimously in the group turned around and said it's got to be Hard Life surely. The band did brainstorm other names but kept returning to Hard Life. It was similar to when he had inspiration for a song. I've learnt that the first idea is always the best, so I've kept that same philosophy with the band, and whenever friends have asked him what the new name was going to be, it always raised a smile or a laugh. So it just feels appropriate. I'm a white middle-class man from England. It's not to say I've had a particularly hard life either. It was more just in response to what happened. Life felt like the obvious thing. It's a great name. I'm really happy with it. For a while after the row, Metaverse found it hard to work on music, but earlier this year he found his flow again and wrote to tears. And the band say the song about growing up and lawyering up marks a new chapter. One lyric makes a reference to ECDC Group owner Sir Stelios Haj-Inal. ECDC Group's lawyers have objected to that lyric, calling it disparaging and defamatory and claiming it is a breach of the settlement it reached with the brand. They said ECDC Group and Sir Stelios were disappointed. Hard Life have chosen to needlessly refresh the dispute, which the band chose to settle several months ago. But Metaverse says he wanted to use the music to reflect what the band had gone through. So what's next for Metaverse and his bandmates? We want to tour, we want to get out there, and we want to play festivals, he said, adding their fans have been incredible. Everything's brand new, we're hitting the ground running with this new song, who knows where we're all going to be next. I'm just so excited to be out and about again. Hopefully we can put this chapter behind us and move on and focus on the music again. The experiences of a group of residents in a supported living complex in Telford illustrate the challenges facing the NHS at the moment. Many report difficulties accessing GPs, while others face long waits for hospital treatment. The knit and natter mornings at the Lawley Bank Court, supported living complex and noisy affairs. One resident tries to start a sing-song, belting out a ring of fire, and though a couple of colourful blankets are on display, there is much more nattering than knitting. Conversations vary, but there is one topic that everyone seems to have an opinion on, namely the difficulty of getting a GP appointment. You're afraid to be ill, says Brenda Stratton. I was number 24 in the queue last week. I only got to number 19 before I was cut off. It's heartbreaking. A forceful, energetic 90-year-old Miss Stratton has been having some eye problems, but try as she might, she couldn't get an appointment. Another resident, 96-year-old Gwendolyn Higgs, was similarly exasperated. A pharmacist had recommended she visit a doctor following a bout of earache. I went over to the receptionist last week, and she said, "We're not making appointments," recalled the cancer survivor. So I said, "What do I have to do then to get one?" she said. "Ring up at 8 o'clock in the morning." So I rang up the following morning. They said they haven't got any appointments. Somebody said to do it online, but they were only doing it for blood tests, not for appointments. It's 5 years since I've been to the doctor for anything, and I still can't get an appointment. What further exasperates the residents of the complex is that there is a GP surgery less than 100 metres from their building. Some are said to have moved in specifically because a doctor was nearby. Even when they get an appointment, however, there is no guarantee it will be in the local practice. The surgery is part of a large group of 6 surgeries, and people can be sent anywhere depending on availability. "I don't drive," said Miss Stratton, "so how do I get there? Taxis at £10 each." The cause of their frustration, as for many people around Telford, is Teldoc, a GP federation created in 2018. I had a case this morning, an 86-year-old lady we've been trying to get an appointment for over a week, says Julie Vernon, who runs a company, Extra Help, that supports people with services such as cleaning and shopping. We phoned the GP again this morning at 8 o'clock, fully booked, so they asked us to phone 111. Phoned 111 and they called out an ambulance. The ambulance came, did an assessment and said, "You need a GP." They phoned the GP and got one tomorrow. So that's how many services have been involved just to get a GP appointment. Told them that since it was set up, there had been a large increase in the population of the town, as several housing estates had been constructed. However, it said that there had been no funding to expand its services. Access to general practice is a national issue, and Telford is no exception, it said in a statement. We acknowledge that access to appointments can sometimes fall short of people's expectations. However, we have and will continue our work to make improvements where necessary to enhance patient access to our services. Polling suggests that most people think public services had deteriorated nationally in recent years. This is the third focus on the town of Telford and has identified facing particular challenges across its courts, schools and health services. Similar problems to those found in Telford are widespread, however. The problems across the NHS don't simply impact the sick, The difficulty of getting appointments means schools have started letting teachers take time off during the day, forcing them to find cover in the classrooms. The long delays in the back of ambulances waiting to get into A&E has led to care homes giving food parcels to residents who need to go to hospital. I think the NHS is broken nationally, says Debbie Price, Chief Executive of Coverage Care Services, which operates 11 care homes across Shropshire. I've been involved in conversations with the hospital for many years, and they're the same conversations I was having 20 years ago. Things haven't really moved on. She believes the way health and social care is funded needs to change. There's been a lot of talk about pooling resources, looking at the individual and having funding available for the individual. Most professional meetings are focused on solving the hospital issues, though whereas I think that social care providers, domiciliary as well as residential and nursing, can provide solutions that they just don't consider. Back at Lordie Bank Court, Joyce is tending to her mother as she does every day. Margaret, aged 69, has dementia and recently had a seizure that necessitated her having to go to hospital. She was in that ambulance for 9 hours. She was dehydrated, she hadn't had her medication and was just sitting in her own wee, she adds, uncomfortable, impinging on her mother's dignity. Despite not having any medical training, Joyce decided the best thing for her mother was to return her home, despite the fact that a doctor had not examined her. She says, then I had the anxiety all right. Did I make the right choice? Is anything going to happen to her? Is she going to pass away? You shouldn't have to go through that. I'm so scared that if she goes in again, something is going to happen to her in the ambulance. It's just sad. The local hospital, the Princess Royal, has some of the longest A&E waiting times in England. Half the patients wait longer than the 4-hour target to be seen, often like Margaret, spending many hours waiting in an ambulance. Patients are routinely treated in corridors or told they are fit to sit, assessed as needing medical attention but unable to be found even a trolley. Should people accept that? No, they shouldn't accept any of that, is the forthright opinion of John Jones, the medical director of the Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Trust, which runs the hospital. The trust was at the centre of the country's largest maternity scandal, but a recent inspection by the Care Quality Commission found significant improvements in maternity care, which are now rated as good. However, the accident and emergency unit in Telford was downgraded to an urgent treatment centre, and is now rated as inadequate. We don't need the CQC to tell us that the experience of people coming into our emergency departments is not adequate, said Dr. Jones. Nobody could walk into an emergency department, whether it was here or anywhere else in the country, and see people being cared for in corridors or ambulances waiting outside and say this is adequate. There are particular factors, he says, that have added to the difficulties. The 2 hospitals the trust runs have been aiming to provide a full range of clinical services, but are not big enough to do so. There have been some problems recruiting staff, and they have been slow in some areas to adopt new working methods. Plans have recently been approved for hospitals to be reconfigured. Telford's A&E will be downgraded to an urgent care centre. Dr. Jones is confident the changes, including more focus on emergency treatment, will improve care. I think the care that we're able to provide next winter will be better thought through. There'll be more options for people who need care. That doesn't mean it's necessary care in the hospital. I think part of this will be about providing some care outside of hospital. So yes, I do think that patients will have a better experience. As part of a 5-day digital detox, 10 Salford teenagers swapped their devices for basic phones that could only make calls and send texts. How did they get on? Will regularly spends more than 8 hours a day staring at his smartphone. When he was younger, he used to love riding his bike. He's 15 now and spends most of his free time after college scrolling through TikTok videos. Last week, Will clocked up 31 hours on social media apps alone, but for the next 5 days, he will have no access to social media. I'm worried how I'll cope, he says. I'll now have to be sociable with my parents. The detox is part of a project looking at younger people's smartphone habits, and Will is one of 10 students at Media City's University Technical College who've agreed to trade in their phones for a basic Nokia handset. Almost every aspect of the students' lives will be affected. They've grown up with smartphones and use the internet for everything. They communicate mainly on Snapchat or FaceTime, use Google Maps rather than A to Z, and are always streaming music on the go. It's going to be a real challenge, says college principal Colin Grant, who is locking the students' devices away for the duration of the experiment. Ruby dreams of becoming an actor. She says she spends way too much time on her phone and often ignores her parents while scrolling through TikTok. Midway through the experiment, they visit the family. When they arrive, the 16-year-old is putting the finishing touches to her makeup before she heads to college. Her father checks she has her work uniform in her bag, and then Ruby's mother drives them to the tram stop. Ruby acknowledges that having a break from a smartphone has opened up more conversation with her parents, and her mum Emma agrees the detox is having a positive impact on her daughter's behaviour. Ruby is pretty addicted to her phone, so it just gives her a chance to see what it was like when I was a teenager, says Emma. She's talking more and she's going to bed earlier. It's a nice break. As they approach the barriers at the station, they can see the tram already pulling away. Usually Ruby would check an app on her phone to find out when the next tram will arrive. Reading timetables on the display board at a tram stop is not something this generation does. Without a phone, I've got no way of knowing. While they wait for the next tram, Ruby tells them about her part-time job at a centre for group Nerf play games. She works a couple of times a week, but isn't entirely sure if she has a shift later today or how long it will be. Her manager has given her the office telephone number in case she needs to clarify her hours, but she feels a bit nervous about calling. It shows you on the app what shift you're doing, but I don't know that now, explains Ruby. I never call work, ever. She pays for a tram ticket, her bank card's getting some rare use without access to a smartphone wallet, and they set off on the hour-long journey. For some of the teens, giving up their smartphone has been really difficult. After just 27 hours, 14-year-old Charlie has dropped out and asked for his device back. They knew their phone was in the same building, he says, but not knowing if someone was trying to get in touch with him and not being able to go online was really stressful. Another thing that seems to be stressing everyone out is the status of their Snap streak, a running total of how many days they have sent Snapchat messages to each other. Some students admit they are so concerned about losing the streak, which can sometimes last more than 1,000 consecutive days. They have asked friends to log into their accounts and keep them going during the detox. Like Charlie, other students taking part in the experiment acknowledge a fear of missing out, but most say they are surprised at how liberating they are finding the experience. Some are getting better sleep, they say, while others feel they have been more productive without their phones. I feel like I'm learning stuff and engaging more. I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything, says Grace, age 15. Straight after school on the first day of the experiment, she and her friends went to buy plastic jewels to gem up her brick phone. Showing it to them as they chat, Grace says the shopping trip was a good distraction from thinking about her locked-away smartphone, and it had another unexpected benefit. It was really peaceful, she said. I really enjoyed it because I got my creative flow back. As soon as I got home, I was drawing stuff and painting. It helped kickstart off finding the things that I like again. In February, the government published a new guidance to try to stop pupils using phones during the school day, but a group of cross-party MPs went one step further in May, saying an outright ban on smartphones for all under 16s, not just at school, should be brought in by whoever wins the general election. In a survey of 2,013 to 18-year-olds conducted by BBC Radio 5 Live and BBC Bite Size, young people were asked about various aspects of life, including mental health and their smartphone habits. The findings of the survey, carried out by polling company Salvation, suggest 23% agree that smartphones should be banned for under 16s, 35% think that social media should be banned for under 16s, and 50% say not having their smartphone on them makes them feel anxious. Last year, this figure was slightly higher at 56%. Simply taking part in this digital detox has set these teens apart from their contemporaries. In the BBC survey, 74% of young people polled said they would not consider swapping their smartphones for a basic device. After 5 long days, it's time for the students to be reunited with their smartphones. Excitement levels are high as the teacher walks out over to the college, safe to retrieve them. Several students scream with anticipation. As soon as they turn their phones back on, the teenagers are glued to their screens, scrolling and catching up on group chats. But most say after taking part in the detox, they would like to find ways to limit their screen time. It's made them realise how much time they spent on social media, and they've realised they need to cut down on it and go out more. I acknowledge this well. I'll try and use less of TikTok, that's for sure. He admits it's been difficult and he's particularly missed listening to music, but time away from his phone has allowed Bill to reignite his passion for cycling, something he's determined to continue instead of spending hours scrolling. 8 hours a day is just crazy, he says.